This is CS50 on Twitch. Hello, everybody. My name is Colton Ogden, and today I am joined by
Nick. My name is Nick. Hello.
Nick was here with us last week. Was it last week?
Yeah. Wow. That was last Tuesday.
Kind of feels, for some reason, it feels like it was a
long time ago.
But no, last week we went through. Remind us what we went through again.
So we walked through machine learning, at least the basics of machine learning, using Keras and TensorFlow and some OpenCV. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did some basic ML. Today, though, we're going to take kind of a step back away from the complexity of that, dive into, well, to talk about what we're gonna look at today, actually.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the mysterious Linux-styled shell, or Unix shell, or Bash in particular.
Up, actually. I should probably bring it up.
Oh, yes, I do actually have a version of a shell up right now. People talk about shell, terminal, console, Bash, Linux shell, command prompt as kind of all the same term. They all mean slightly different things, but generally speaking, that's kind of their ideas. They mean this. They probably mean something a little bit closer to like running actual commands like this, or there's all sorts of stuff that we're gonna go through and talk about. But generally, that's when you see in like a movie, there's like the hacker person going like, clickety-clack, and they've got a bunch of stuff going on their screen, and then they're in.
What's that one website that...
Yes, that is a great website, actually. Let's go find that. Hacker type?
Yeah, that's the one. It was in today in lecture during the Muppet video. They actually had it in
They actually used
lecture.
it? That's kind of awesome. It always, the Wi-Fi. Gotta love the Wi-Fi.
Oh, is the Wi-Fi acting
We'll get
up
there.
a little bit? Yeah,
that's okay. We'll
basically, a website lets you pretend like you're a hacker and let you type away. We got a few people in the chat. Let's catch up on that, too.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people. So shout outs to everybody that was in here early. So Bavik Knight, good to see you. First Sunlight and Frost Cakes. Frost Cakes is a new person. I'm not sure I've seen Frost Cake in here. So welcome. Welcome to CS50 on Twitch. Bill Cures, Amjad QZZ1 is new as well, and we briefly chatted. So thank you for joining us. Asley is in the chat. We have Tuxman29 that says sudo echo, let's make some commands.
And we did actually run a version of that. I didn't use sudo, but we did echo, let's make some commands.
Doing it.
Big fan.
Administrative permissions. Bavignite rm-rf star.
Also an emoji, I think. But that would also remove everything. Don't type that command as an FYI.
Excuse me. Andre from the Facebook, as always, good to have you with us, Andre. I see you like to live dangerously, says Tuxman20.
Very true.
In reference to Bavignite's command there. Bella Kier says hello, Nick.
Hello.
Tuxman, hey Colton, hey Nick, hey Tuxman, good to see you. Bavik Knight, how's your day going? Day's going really well. How's your day going?
Fantastic. It's over here. We actually have a huge celebration for this weekend because it's Harvard Yale. So that other school that lives somewhere in the rest of this country is coming here to play us in football. And I actually don't watch any other football games the entire year except this one.
You have
to. Everyone, yeah, you have to go. Like the whole school goes. Yale's going to be there. We got to make sure that they know that we care.
Have they won recently?
They kind of have won the past 2 years. It's like I showed up to college and they started winning,
okay.
which was
super
super
that,
annoying.
we had like a 12 or 19
yeah, it's like super long we were winning.
Of victories.
We got to bring that back.
Mage Rafat, hi everyone. Hey Mage, good to see you again. Regex, the cryptic language of forgotten deities. Yes.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And on Tuesday, David J. Malin's going to talk to us about regexes actually. Going to give us a little bit more of a thorough introduction to that. I'm not sure if it's Joha1NA or if it's Johan A.
Johanna?
Oh yeah, maybe Johanna, I'm not sure. Glad to have you with us, hello. Let me know how to pronounce your name so I'm pronouncing it correctly. And then Blue Booger, it's been a couple streams. I do remember Blue Booger. Delete star from the chat. Good luck, Harvard, says Asley.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
75 towards Harvard.
Yeah, hopefully we break our losing streak.
All right, well let's dive into some Linux stuff. And this isn't necessarily specific to Linux.
No, although if you were to try and type a lot of these things on like PowerShell, they kind of work in concept, but you'd have to kind of dig around in some docs for like specifics.
For that, people would have to do like the Windows subsystem for Linux.
Yeah.
New,
oh yeah, they have Bash on Ubuntu on Windows.
Yeah, I've
Windows
heard
10.
it has some limitations. It's not quite like parity.
It's kind of weird.
Feature for feature, like more or less close.
Get it pretty right though.
Yeah.
So it's like a useful thing. You could definitely follow along using that on this. If you know of Docker, we'll probably host a tutorial on that actually in the future.
Yeah, that's coming up
but,
soon.
You're welcome to use a Docker machine, and I just spun up like an Ubuntu Docker container, which is what this is. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways to do this, but I will be working in Bash, which is the actual shell that we're going to be using.
And this is something you can do on Linux. You can do this on obviously you're on a Mac.
Yep.
So.
Any Unix style system is pretty readily available. I think Mac by default gives you Bash as a shell. It's a really common shell. It's super useful. Like it's one of the most versatile shells, I think. Some other common ones are like Z shell, which is literally ZSH. And if you ever want to like test out some new shells, you can always just type the name of the shell, and that'll bring you into that shell. I apparently tried to mess with it. That is, the prompt changed entirely. I don't remember writing that, but I guess I did.
Those look like ASCII character or color codes?
Yeah, I think they're the color escape codes for prompt. And I guess Z shell doesn't care. And then you can type exit to get out of those shells. SH is literally just shell. Unshockingly, that actually just does nothing. But it did actually move me into the shell. There's Bash. There's another one that I'm going to pub a little bit, but I won't actually use because it's kind of its own thing. It's called Fish. Super cool. I'm a huge fan of Fish. It's super customizable. It does all sorts of things. The prompt is really beautiful. Mine is currently not, but like that's okay. Fish does all sorts of just like beautiful autocomplete stuff. So if I wanted to like cat a thing, it'll auto-suggest all sorts of stuff for me, and I can just tab complete that or list things out. It's very, very well designed. I'm a huge fan, but we're going to stick with Bash for some kind of old-fashioned ways of doing things.
You introduced me to Fish, actually. I have to look more into it. I think it was last week. Let's see. I think we're miss a few messages here. So,
oh yeah.
Harvard for the wins is Bavik Knight.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for that. Linz Potaguara. Hi everybody. Hi Linz. Good to have you with us again. Johanna is fine. Johanna or Johanna? Because I want to make sure I get that.
Yeah, we want to make sure we get this right.
Well. WSL is open here just in case, says Bavik. Bavik, I'm assuming he's on a Windows system then.
Yep.
Blue Booger. Docker, isn't that a brand of clothes?
Is it? Is it actually a brand of clothes?
I think it is.
That's awesome.
I think it is.
Yeah, I'm not super fashionable or into clothing. I'm wearing a tech t-shirt. But like, yeah, it also might be a brand of clothing. We are in reference to the containerization system, which is a little bit different. Although, I guess in concepts, they both hold things.
They both hold, yeah, exactly.
Kind of
interesting.
interesting.
Just another silly bot. Glad to have you with us again. I know you've been with us before. It's late in my meridian, so I'm just passing by. I want to wish you a good, fun stream. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It'll be on YouTube later, so you can watch it in all of its glory when it's fully uploaded. And post a comment. You'll let us know. And join us for the next stream. Fashion show coming up. You gonna host?
Hey.
You gonna host?
I'm down. Show? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm super down.
Tech gear fashion show. Am I crazy to remember a shell that uses C as prompts?
Oh, so I think what you're thinking of is the like Windows command prompt, which uses like C://.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
which is technically a shell, I believe. I'm not super familiar with it. I try and avoid it at all costs. I think it's super inelegant to use. It's a pain. I'm not a huge fan.
It has like completely different words for all the common stuff too, like dear instead of ls.
Yes. And then CD, I think, doesn't do what it does in Bash. It's like super annoying if you switch between them.
Yeah, it is definitely pretty weird.
Yeah.
Docker's having a problem in the WSL with the daemon thingy.
Oh, you might not, depending on how WSL is configured, you might not have like permissions to set up Docker containers because they require some kind of hardware level access. I've had daemon issues before, not on Mac, but on Ubuntu container or Ubuntu like machines that run Docker, and on those I think I solved it just by giving it sudo access, which was not the most elegant solution. Definitely not something I would recommend, but I know it does work in
I feel like
concept.
it's always something to try, and I probably
it's probably not a good like first try. And if you're wondering what sudo is or what we mean by like access or things like that, then that's exactly what we're going to go talk about.
Yeah,
so
why don't we start
no
diving into a little bit of that? I know we're
yeah.
there. So, a lot of chat today, which is great.
Yeah, it's awesome. We love the back and forth. That's one of the best parts of this.
Yeah.
And so in true stream style, we actually basically just have nothing prepared, and we're going to walk through nothing prepared. We have very little like actual things written down that we've prepared, but we do have kind of a general idea of where we're going.
An outline, a flow.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like that actually. It's really fun to kind of just walk through as we go and have it be a little bit fluid.
Yeah, if somebody suggests something cool, we could like go into.
Oh, we can definitely go into it.
Yeah, so definitely shoot out some ideas as always.
All right, so Bash, which is basically what I have open now. If you wanted to like, all right, I should explain lots. We'll start from the very beginning.
How about if you're on a Mac, how do you actually open it? I guess that.
Right, that is a great question. So if you're on a Mac, you can use the Spotlight search up in the top right, and then just type in term, and it'll bring up terminal, and then pressing enter will bring me to my terminal. Alternatively, if you go into Launchpad, and search for, or not, do none of those things, and search for terminal, it will also come up. And generally on any machine, like if you have like your Mac or if you're on some sort of Ubuntu distro or something like that, they usually have the ability to search for some terminal. And so you can click that, and mine will just bring me to the one that's already open, but yours will open a new one if you have not done so already.
Nice.
Cool. So once you're in a terminal of some sort, if you want to follow on exactly what we are doing, you can make sure that you're in bash by typing in bash and pressing enter. That will switch your shell. Whatever shell you started out on, it will switch it over to bash, assuming that you have bash installed. One of my favorite and I think undervalued commands is which, and it tells you just which thing you're using. But before that even becomes meaningful, so it'll tell me this, it tells me a path. We should tell you a little bit about how the kind of Unix style is organized. So basically, in Unix, a lot of people imagine it as some sort of tree. I know some people who imagine it as like a tree going upward. Some people imagine it as a tree going downward. Doesn't really matter, as long as you're consistent. So I generally, I think, imagine it as kind of like a downward looking tree, like kind of branches down, because I refer to going up in directories and then down into a directory. I think that makes a lot of sense for me, but if that doesn't work for you, no worries. And so the way that this tree is rooted is you have slash. That is the beginning of the tree. That's at the very top for me, or at the very bottom if you think of it the other way. And so slash is as high up as you can go. It's just the directory that contains all. Mostly. It contains all as far as like user land is concerned, which is great. So if we wanted to get into that directory, we use cd. cd is actually a really powerful command if you want to go between directories. It means change directory, or it stands for. And we can do cd slash. And so what cd takes as an optional argument is a path. It can be a relative path, meaning like using kind of dot notation, which we'll talk about in a sec. Or it can be an absolute path, which means it starts with a slash and then writes out where we're actually trying to go. And so you'll notice in my prompt, that's the thing to the left over here, there's a bunch of information that I have displayed, and you can add and customize that however you'd like. I try to keep mine pretty minimal, so it just says the host of my computer, my username currently, and then which directory I'm in. And then I keep the $ for kind of traditional sake. And so what that does is it changed from this kind of tilde, which means home, to slash, which is what we just discussed. It's the uppermost directory. I can't go any higher than this.
And every user has their own sort of home directory on the hard drive?
Yes, ideally. You actually are not required to have a home directory, but generally speaking, most users will have a home directory. And if I wanted to get back to that home directory, I can actually just type cd, enter, and you'll notice I go right back. Nice. And then there's another kind of useful part to cd, which is cd dash. And that actually brings you back to whichever directory you were just in. So if I go to some random directory on my Mac, then I can do cd dash to bring me back to whichever directory I just came from. It's kind of a useful little trick, and a lot of people don't know about it. There's a lot of like little tricks, and I'm very lazy, so I learn a lot of these tricks so that I can not do as much work.
It's smart.
Yeah, it makes it easier.
Upfront time in the long run. So Johanna says, I'm from Germany, Berlin, so however you think you would say it in German. I would imagine Johanna then in that case would probably work.
I agree.
And then Bavik Knight says sudo su.
Yes, sudo su does actually, what Bavik Knight points out is that typing in sudo su would grant you root access, particularly on like an Ubuntu distro. And we'll talk about that in a sec. We're kind of going to talk by example, because I think a lot of these things are very difficult to discuss without context.
Yeah, I think,
they're hard in the abstract.
Showing it visibly too and seeing what we're doing, I think makes the most. It illustrates the utility.
Makes it a little bit easier.
Tuxman, it was a TIL for him.
Oh, sweet.
Or him or her. I'm guessing it's him because Tuxman. It was a TIL for me actually. I didn't know about CD dash.
Really?
I am an intermediate level shell user.
That's awesome.
This is
I'm glad I can help. That's fantastic.
Some cool TILs.
So we'll get into some cool tricks by the end. So then the next kind of basic command that everyone knows, or should, is ls, which basically stands for list. And what that does is it prints out what your current directory contains in it with a caveat. It prints out the things that are meant to be displayed to you in your current directory. ls takes a bunch of options. So in command line, I guess, jargon, people will always say, oh, you can use flags or options to change kind of the way that commands work. And in the Unix paradigm, this was to make things really flexible. So if you have these kind of small units, you have ls, you have cd, you have like all these kind of like very minimal commands. And what the Unix basically like grand idea was take these, make them really like flexible with what they can do, and then make them pluggable into each other. And we'll talk about that a lot, basically around halfway through, where when you can mix all these commands together, you can do some really complex stuff with very minimal syntax and without having to rewrite code or commands. It was a really cool idea, and I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a very good like a super
great
modular.
paradigm.
It's like software
Right.
engineering as well.
Just
I think it's
modular
probably
design.
a universal truth. It looks like the Jocelyn says, "Hello, nice to see you."
Yes. Nice to see you too.
Hi, Colton and Nick. I am Alvin, 15 years old from Bergenfield, New Jersey. I will tune in to learn more about game development.
Oh,
Hey,
that's awesome.
nice to have, or Alvin, I should say. Nice to have you on. We should have a game dev one. Well, yeah, probably within a couple weeks or so. It's a busy time of year. CS50 just ended. We had our last lecture today.
Yeah, that's true.
We have we have Thanksgiving next week, and then after that is the hackathon.
Yeah, maybe a week after that. Like you get an extra week between Thanksgiving and hackathon.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Maybe.
So yeah, it's going to be a busy couple weeks, but we'll have a ton of game dev stuff in the future. Super happy to have you. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah. All right, so we have ls, and I just said that there is a small caveat to that. So we're actually going to do ls-a, and you actually, there's this kind of joke amongst like kind of scripters or shell devs that the way people type ls tells you a lot about like who taught them. So hopefully you all will start to kind of do it the way I do it, which is ls-alh is my favorite command as far as ls goes, and it basically stands for A is for all, L is for long, H is for human readable on any sort of number. And so what that prints out is this. It's technically the same output as this in concept, but it gives me a lot more information. And so I also do a lot of work in cybersecurity. I run the cyber club here, and we basically end up, that's why we get into this habit, is because like a lot of the flags or things in our competitions are hidden in kind of these like very clear, like obvious ways to find them, and no one sees them because they're just not in this habit.
A cybersecurity stream would be also super sick.
That I think would be very cool. And maybe coming up.
Linux commands are always useful when diving into dev stuff.
This is also very true.
Blueburger, will you be covering shell programming? Here scripts, for loops. Oh, I'm guessing he's thinking like bash.
Like bash scripting. Yeah. So we will definitely talk a little bit about that, especially because it's really useful to like automate a bunch of tasks really quickly, and they're kind of useful to just know off the top of your head. Ironically, I'm positive I will miss a bunch of syntax when we go to that section.
I think I've written like 2 bash scripts in my life.
Really?
So
wow.
I need to brush up on that.
Oh yeah, no, they're super helpful.
There were old streams of game dev. Ashley is generously providing Alvin with some information. So thanks for that, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. All right, so this output, it looks like a lot, and it is, but it's definitely breakable or breakdownable. So this section here is, I think, fairly easy to understand. It makes a lot of sense if you're just used to using a computer. It's the last date that a file was touched. And so the reason that I specify touched instead of like opened is there are a lot of ways of like manipulating files that actually don't open them. So this is supposedly the last date. It's supposed to be the last date or time that a file was actually like interacted with. And we'll leave that kind of vague for now. And then here's the actual file name. You'll see dot and dot dot in every directory on bash. Dot dot means the directory above. Dot is the current directory. And so sometimes people will refer to things as using those sorts of paths. And those are called relative paths. So if I say dot slash, that's going to be in the current directory. Slash is going to just separate path folder names basically, and then going down from there. If I do dot dot slash, then that's in the previous directory, in the higher directory from me, and then we're going to deal with something in there. And we'll give some examples of that in a sec.
For Sunlight says, hello, Colton, Nick, regulars, and everyone. Hey, For Sunlight, thanks for joining
Welcome.
us. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you said your name was it Nate in a prior stream? Forgive me if that is incorrect. I thought that was what you said your name was.
Well, if you're right, what a memory.
DCoffee3296 says, hi, all. And actually, Dan Coffee taught me how to use ls-la. That was, so
nice.
In your conversation about ls, that was how I used to use it for a long time.
That's
I typically
awesome.
only use ls now because I don't do a lot of shell
That's
stuff.
okay. But yeah, it's really funny that people have all these just different flags that they pass to ls. Whipstreak.
Whipstreak. Yes, sorry, my bad.
Right.
Fatma. Oh, okay, that's Fatma. Fatma is on the Facebook group.
There you
so,
go.
I saw the message that she posted earlier. She was pubbing it to I think her school district or some folks she was
that's
working
awesome.
with. So thanks so much for doing that, Fatma. I will remember that Whipstreak was Nate. So thank you, Ashley,
That's awesome.
for clarifying that. Dan Coffey says ls-lah add the H
Right.
for human.
That is one of my favorite flags. I use the H to make it so that these sizes of files, so this is actually the file size, right here, are human readable. So they use like B, G, and K instead of just random gibberish. It's not random. It looks like this. And they try to give it to you in, I believe, bytes. So I just don't like that one as much. And then over on the left here is a bunch of permission stuff. So D basically stands for, I actually don't entirely remember what D stands for, my apologies. But if you look at the next set of 9 letters, those are very useful to know, and they're very useful to understand why you can and cannot do certain things. So root generally is going to have read, write, and execute access. That's basically what these stand for. Read, or R, is for reading. Can I read the file or directory? W, write, is can I write to it? And then execute is whether or not I'm allowed to execute that on this computer. Root or sudo is generally allowed to do all 3. And actually, super users can change permissions at will, so it wouldn't really necessarily matter. Looks like we have a bunch of stuff. Yes.
You want to read some of them?
Sure.
I feel like I've been reading most.
No, you're all good.
So
let's see.
I will pull off. So for Sunlight, because we were talking about previously about that being Fatma, she said she had one of her students. I guess she plugged it in her school district.
Oh, that's awesome.
So she plugged the stream. So
Wow, thank
some
you.
of her students are watching.
We appreciate it.
Looks like you can take it from Math.
All right, so Math 08, right, stands for directory. Thank you, I appreciate it. That's what this D is for. It actually just tells you that it's a directory. Very nice. Is that therm? Oh no, them, RM, RO.
The Mr. O.
Oh, the Mr. O?
I'm not sure. It's a guess.
That's a good deal. So it says, hello, gents. How are you this fine evening? I'm struggling to read. I really should work on reading.
It's going to be a good weekend, though.
We are doing fantastic, or at least I'm doing fantastic.
Yeah,
hopefully Colton's also.
fine. This is a ton of fun. Love doing these streams.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. And then the Jasong says, hey, Colton, what languages are you comfortable with? What language are you comfortable with, Colton?
English. No, probably like C, C++. I don't know, pretty much most contemporary languages I've used at one point or another, and they all kind of blend together when you learn.
Yeah.
It's the really paradigm shifting ones that are kind of tricky, like when you get into like Lisp programming and stuff like that. Like that can be a little bit tricky, but Java, JavaScript, Python, C, C++, Lua, most common languages, I would say.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Bhavik Knight and Irene Naya?
Yeah, she goes by Irene, is how she pronounces her name.
Very cool. Both helped me out in saying D is for directory. Thank you. Tuxman says he'll change his alias. Very nice. The human readable part to LS is very useful. And hello.
Hey, Irene, good to see you.
And are we doing live tutorials on this channel by the Mr. O?
Yeah.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, so Nick today is giving us a tutorial on how to use basic Linux commands, and maybe we'll get into some basic shell scripting. I do game development from scratch. It's more like a build something from scratch typically, but we do have, like today is more of a tutorialization.
Right.
It kind of varies. Kareem and I do tutorials as well.
Yeah. And then Nuanda points out Lua is so different, hates Lua. You're speaking to 2 people who just taught a class in Lua.
Yeah, for those, I think we mentioned it last time, but Nick helped teach my games course with me, so we both used Lua for that, and that was, I don't know, I enjoy Lua. It has some shortcomings. It reminds me of bash scripting because it requires you to end your stuff with like end.
Right. Literally. That is a very strange, I mean, I understand it, but weird paradigm.
It's weird. Like Python, you can get away with it if you use the significant white space. It's kind of nice. I like that.
The worst, though, in Python, not to, I guess, go on too much of a tangent, but in Python, when you accidentally use spaces and tabs inconsistently, and it calls you out for it, it doesn't let you compile the code. So that's very annoying.
I think it's kind of a blessing for, especially when dealing with people that are new to programming who don't have like enforced style.
Right.
I think it's such a helpful thing to actually have like a consistent standard at which the compiler is literally enforcing it.
That is a very good point.
Not like a teacher, right? It's kind of like slapping you
helps
on the
kind of
wrist.
force you into styling correctly.
It's good stuff.
And honestly, we need better styling in industry. So,
all right, just gonna hit that follow button. So
awesome.
Mr. O, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Lewis scoping system gave me a headache. Yeah, it's a little bit. You have to be careful. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
It's like the inverse of Python, where like Python you have to use global specify that a variable is global. It can
kind of like
headache.
JavaScript, I think, where it's just kind of like random.
Yeah,
you're like willy-nilly scoping, and you're like, I hope it works.
It's a bit screwed up as well, definitely. Text me says, over the moon for Lua. It's because it's a reference to Lua being the Portuguese word for moon. Appreciate that.
That's awesome.
That's a good one. Mr. O, will you guys help me improve my understanding of C++? So we don't have anything lined up yet for C++. It's possible that in the future we may do a tutorial on C++, but I'll have to give some thought to that because I have coded in a game development context before, just haven't done it recently, and it's kind of it can be tough to debug live sometimes because memory management can be a little bit finicky.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have a tutorial on mem management.
I know you like low-level C stuff.
I'm a huge fan of low-level C.
We'll maybe look at that. And C++, are you familiar with C++?
Actually, one of the courses I'm in right now switched over to C++. Great transition from C. Yeah.
Which course is that?
61. So it's basically like low-level systems design.
Interesting. Okay.
Very cool.
Didn't realize that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My CS50X final project was actually a small game that played in a virtual computer in Minecraft that uses Lua.
That's awesome.
Was it the ComputerCraft
I think
mod?
it sounds like it.
Yeah, that does sound like it. Or I think it was also Red Power used Lua scripting. I forget which one it is. That's awesome though. Good job on that.
Nice.
What the L stands for in -LAH?
Long form. So instead of printing out the kind of shortened abbreviated version, it just prints everything out on one line each, and they're in a very lengthy format. Very nice question, though.
I just realized, thanks to Dan Coffey, my mic has been muted the whole time, so hopefully you've been able to hear me okay. Hopefully I've been speaking loud enough. I apologize for that. I should sound a lot better now. Jawsong, any game dev soon? Probably in about a week or so. The next week is going to be a little light. It's Thanksgiving break, and then after that we'll probably do a game dev stream. Yep. Hinelar, this is the first time we've seen Hinelar, so thank you for joining us. Says nice. Asley says cool. Amjad QZZ, can you guys keep moving forward and specialize some specific time for comments? Sorry, we're getting so many.
Very good point. We get very excited.
It's a very good point. We will do so.
Yes. All right, so we have LS'd things. We've listed out what's going on here. And generally, LS works pretty well. A very common paradigm is you'll see people traversing directories doing this. Like they might go CD library, LS, and then they'll do CD like logs, LS. And you kind of see this like CD, LS, which is very entertaining. To give an example of how to go back up those directories, I can go back up both of them at once by doing .. / which means go into the directory that is 2 above ours, which is currently where we are now. And basically, when I refer to most Linux things or most like terminal style stuff, I'm going to use terminology like we are currently in something. That's just, I guess, a very common paradigm for users of Linux style things.
It's kind of like the state of your shell.
Right. It means the state of where I am in shell, what my shell has access to at the moment. I saw the Mr. O says, why is the Linux terminal so intimidating? And hopefully it'll be a little less intimidating after this, because it isn't necessarily inherently terrible. I think people it has a lot of jargon to it, and there's a lot of kind of people seem to like just know things, and that can be really, really weird. And it's not necessarily understood as to like, how did they get there? How do I know CD ... and things like that? And I think a lot of people just kind of learn it by example.
And I think the interface too is kind of disparate, or not disparate, but it's kind of so separate from the GUIs that we're just used to, like with all the devices we use on a daily basis. Like obviously terminals were super ubiquitous back in like the 80s and 90s even. But like today,
use a GUI.
they always use a GUI for everything. So it all looks kind of arcane for I think most people when they first see it.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool once you actually start getting really familiar with it and using it for a lot of things. I use it to open up apps and stuff because I think it's faster. I don't know if that's actually true. I just feel faster doing it. So I think a lot of people look at my laptop and they're kind of confused. And actually, what is that? Linz Podeguara talks about the tab auto-completion feature. And that's a great feature that people often forget about or don't know about. If you start typing, let's see if I can find something that has multiple, if you start typing something, like if I wanted to CD into a U directory, I can actually tap tab and it'll try and autocomplete it. However, it can only autocomplete up to the information it knows, and there are 2 directories in here, user information and users, that both start with U. So what I can do is double tap tab and it'll list out the options for me. And I can then pick between them. I might say whack space, and whack is backslash.
That's a term that I just learned today.
Yep,
actually.
that is what a term.
Interesting.
Yeah. Working with a lot of the cyber tech people, they always will say things like, oh, do this, whack, whack, this, whack. And you're just kind of like, oh, right, that. And I kind of just got used to it. And now it'll autocomplete the rest of that directory, and I can press enter, and now I'm in that directory. Spaces are kind of annoying in Bash. If you, like most people, try not to name things with spaces, because it's kind of annoying to type that whack space, because you have to tell Bash to not exclude that space from the actual name of the thing. Another way to do that is to wrap it in quotes. That also does this.
APS Knight it says, hi, I'm Aman from India, joining for the first time. Thank you so much for joining, Aman. Glad to have you with us.
Sweet. Oh, and just we researched a little bit about Lua's name. It comes from or after SOL, Simple Object Language, as a joke, since Sol is sun in Portuguese and Lua is moon in Portuguese. And now I have to like Lua for the wordplay.
Exactly. You're in now. You're in now.
It's a great, gotta love CS humor. C was invented on a machine with 10 kilobytes of RAM. That I didn't know.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense why they were so obsessed with memory things. What do we think about the hacks from Mr. Robot? How accurate are they? So Mr. Robot does all sorts of cool things on like cyber tech challenges and cybersecurity things. I'm a huge fan, so generally I think they're pretty accurate. He does all sorts of cool work on projects ranging from like the exploding bomb PSET, for example, and all the way to like the vulnerability, I think, disk image, which was very cool. It's a very fun thing to go with. And then Bob Ignite points out that yes, space has to be escaped with a whack. It's super annoying to make a dir with a space. I agree. Generally, I use underscores instead, or just don't use spaces. Camel casing and underscores are kind of two different paradigms, and both I think are very valid. Cool. So I'm going to go back into my home directory, and we're going to talk a little bit about some other commands that might be really useful. So we have cd, we have ls. Cd is to change directories, and it takes a directory's name, or just kind of where you want to go. If I tried to go into developer, which is a directory from my previous directory, but it is not in my home directory, this should fail. And it says no such file or directory, and that's kind of a pain. But it's just because I didn't provide the right path. So what I can do is add a slash, and this will work totally fine. And so that's a actual, like, forgetting the name, absolute path. There we go. Adding that slash as opposed to the previous one, which assumes some sort of relative path.
Right.
And I'm going to go back. I could have also just typed cd on its own. And also, some useful tricks that are related to terminals on a lot of systems, but are not necessarily directly inherent parts to the terminal, are the control commands. So I'm a huge fan of using them because they can make my life a lot easier, a lot faster. But a lot of people don't know about them. So let's say I was typing out some very long command. This is totally valid CS. And I realized that I forgot to put a quote at the beginning and type echo. So I can do Control A. And I can then be at the beginning of my terminal, and I can do just that. And now it's a valid command.
I didn't know that.
It's a very useful
It's a new
one. Using your arrow keys, you can actually go up in order to access previous commands on most systems, which is also super useful as a shortcut. Bless you.
Thank you.
So I can go back up to this previous command. I can use Control A to edit something here, and maybe I wanted to echo or something absurd. And then I realized that's a completely invalid command, so I could just press enter and have it give me some sort of error. But I can also Control E to go to the end of the line, and Control U wipes the line for me. And so I'm a huge fan of using kind of the Control A, E, U, and L to clear off my terminal. So
this is very clearly, very quickly showing me how little I know about using the command line.
I'm a huge fan.
Mr. Amos says, if I learn Chinese, can I join the Dark Army? I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Do you happen to know that?
I believe that's a reference to the group of hackers that kind of lives on the dark web.
Oh, okay.
Ish, if you can find them.
Gotcha. I know nothing about that, I have to say. Tab is the only way you can get around without ripping his hairs out. Says Taxman29. System is in English and French. Can we talk about I'm assuming you'll probably get
PS is the next thing we were about to talk about. Very nice.
I think this is useful. Explainshell.com. I'm not super familiar with it.
Sounds like it would explain the shell. That's cool. I like it.
GNOME terminal displays the full path before the $sign. Is there any way to set that in Max terminal, or do you always need PWD for it?
Yeah, no, you can totally set that. And actually, we'll talk about that right after we talk about PS or process, because I'm a huge fan of customizing my actual prompt as well. And Macs totally allow you to do that.
You want to read this one?
Yeah. Frame of reference, nice. Frame of ref says, hi, thank you very much. I'm currently using a PC with Windows, and I'm wondering how to get a PC with Linux through a server, PC with Linux OS without dual booting or installing it on my PC. Thank you. Basically, a virtual machine would be a way of doing that. VirtualBox is a great, basically, visor for that. It's free and totally open to download. And then you could also use Docker, which definitely has a Windows port, I believe, or has a Windows download, and that would allow you to spin up machines of kind of any operating system on your computer.
They make that super easy, right?
Yeah.
Like you just did Docker for Windows, and then just get
straight,
super easy.
So either one would totally work, and neither require you to actually go through.
Tune in for our Docker tutorial, which will be coming up. I'm not sure exactly when we put that. I think it was like after Thanksgiving or something like that. It's coming up if you're curious. And thank you also for joining us, Shane. Appreciate it. RuneMax, you can also use Control R to search for previously used commands.
I'm a huge fan of the reverse search. So Control R, if you have a command that you know you typed a very long time ago and you wanted to go and find it, but you don't want to press up arrow to just go up one at a time, you can do Control R and then start typing the command, and it will bring up the closest match. It tries to go to the nearest one in your history. And basically, my previous command that had py in it is not Python. It's actually me grabbing a lorem ipsum from baconipsum.com and pasting it into my clipboard. So now if I do Command V, we get this.
Nice.
Which is a weirdly meat-filled lorem ipsum. I don't know why that was my command, but that's okay.
Get a little insight into Nick Wong's
what
daily
Nick does.
activities.
Apparently it's very strange. Oh, man.
Shayna G, hello with the Bob Ross. Pixel Bob.
Nice.
I'm wondering this so I can learn Linux OS. Is there any online website you can practice to type in the terminal without installing Linux? Do you know?
Yes, there is. I believe REPL.com has a terminal.
If the internet's working.
Oh, actually, this worked. So this is the hacker type.
Oh, nice.
I can type random
So
things.
Nick is actually typing right now. This is him typing in the console, showing how skilled he is as a programmer.
I believe this is C++.
So just
really funny.
You would be the richest man in the world.
I would be so rich if I could type that quickly, accurately.
All bug-free, yeah.
Super bug-free, that's awesome. That's hackertype.net. They're pretty cool, or HackerTyper. And then there's also REPL.it, I believe, and that allows you to do it. Or as suggested in the comments, you can use Linux, like Bash on Ubuntu on Windows 10, or you can use a virtual machine, you can use Docker. There's a bunch of ways that you could do it without actually loading it into the computer, or at least without installing it.
Cool. TIL.
Cool.
A lot of TILs for me today, too. This is very exciting. Let me see. Where did we catch up on? Sorry. The Dark Army is a hacker group in Mr. Robot.
Okay. Good to know.
Dark is very heavy, to be honest. Yeah,
definitely
it can be.
room for
definitely.
debate. Yep.
Yeah, because I think if you have multiple installations that use the same container, they optimize their space, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's there's some like very good use cases for Docker, and also the Docker paradigm is certainly not to have a full machine running on a Docker container, although a lot of us use them for that. That is actually not their intended use case. They try to make it more of like a kind of the Linux paradigm, but for applications, like full, complete applications, which is very cool.
APS Nice Thank you. We customize the terminal in Ubuntu.
Yep,
I think you're
we
getting to
will
that,
go
right?
to that. Yep.
Perth Kumar, hi, I like your live session. So easy to understand how you guys talk. Thanks a million.
Awesome.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Perth.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for joining us. Happy you think so. Perth Kumar 007.
Yep.
Great username. On Windows, I installed Docker today, then ran out of memory many times. I had to remove it. Oh, sorry to hear about that. That's unfortunate. Don't leave your shell open. Just Control R. But will it?
Control R is reverse search, so I'm not exactly sure what you meant by that for Sunlight.
In case he or she means maybe if you quit your terminal, they think that Control R will still work for what you did before, but that's not the case.
Not entirely. Not that I know of. So basically, if you are, I think possibly what you mean is like clearing out history. So I can actually type history and I'll get a list of all the past like 1,000 commands that I ran.
Wow, that's cool.
Which is kind of neat. There's some interesting ones in here. There's some like waitress serving. I was doing some Git stuff. So
what is Waitress here?
Waitress is a server for like serving websites, and it happens to work with any WSGI applications. So like Django, for example.
I see. Gotcha.
Actually, I think I'm giving a talk that will talk about that on Monday.
Seminar? Or
yeah, seminar for like Django and how to kind of get that up and running.
Oh, okay,
So,
tune in for that. CS50 seminar Monday with Nick on Django and WSGI applications.
Yep.
You can also use Linux Bash on shell or Git. Yep. I was always told rm-rf/ is a fun time. So Slater USA. That's
funny.
Definitely don't type that.
Don't type that. Although we will destroy a Linux container.
We need the troll face. We need some troll faces in the chat for that one.
Yes.
How did you pipe the output of your curl command to your paste clipboard?
Yeah, so piping is also a super cool feature of like kind of the Unix paradigm or the Linux paradigm. And basically what it does is, let's say I want to type in some random gibberish. A pipe or a vertical bar basically takes the output of that thing and sticks it into the input of the next thing. And it's one of the greatest inventions, I think, of all of Linux.
Piping, yeah.
Piping.
Like chain programs together.
Right, and that's why everything can be so modular, so kind of lightweight. You're not reusing things, and it's also a lot easier to debug. And so when I echo this random gibberish into, I was going to pipe it into word count, which also has a character parameter, so you can just count how many characters that is. That's actually kind of fun. So we'll do that. So apparently I typed 25 characters of gibberish.
Basically
That's
taking the output of one program, putting it into another one, and then just like chaining that over and over
you
again.
just chain them all together, which is very fun. But the question was actually, how did I put that into my clipboard and then paste it? And so on Mac, this is actually a Mac feature, I believe. I don't know about it on Ubuntu, but you can type pb copy, paste bin copy, or pasteboard copy, and that will allow you to copy whatever the output was, whatever went to standard out. And then if I wanted to paste that, I can either, I believe pb paste is a command. So I can run pb paste to actually paste that from my clipboard, or I can just Command V and that will do the same.
And so that's on your clipboard globally, or is that just for your shell?
That's for the entire Mac computer. So if I wanted to like grab that onto my copy, and then I could type that gibberish here.
That's so cool.
Very useful.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I'm a huge fan of using that.
Let's see, where do we leave off on? Hacker Typer is the Linux kernel source code, which is in. Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah.
I think I did hear
That makes
that
a lot of
before.
sense. Cool.
Yeah. For Sunlight, Colton is awesome to understand my questions. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Jinx Decoy, the D is silent.
In Django, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I'm on that jingle. Could you please
awesome.
give us a big picture of why one should learn Linux OS and basically how one can become a skilled hacker, like we're trying to show Mr. Robot's frame of ref?
Oh, you guys are referring to the show. I understand a little bit better what we're actually talking about. I was thinking you guys were talking about the guy, Mr. Robot, who I just realized that's also a show. Sorry, one sec. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it is worth knowing about. What is the name of virtual machine? There's a Mr. Robot. This is what I was thinking of. Was the Mr. Robot virtual machine, which is a CTF style virtual machine. Totally worth going through. It's very fun. Sorry, I forgot about that. Cool, now we're all on the same page. And the question from Frame of Ref was, can we have a big picture of why one should learn Linux OS? And to kind of break that down, Linux is the name of the actual kernel, just as an FYI. And so kernel is basically the all-powerful being that runs your computer. There is, in kind of like low-level systems, classes and things like that, people will talk about userland versus kernel land. And userland is very pretty, very like the rules all work. People will break things, they're controlled. It's like, it has regulation. It's like a civil society. Kernel land is like just chaos. Just like good luck, hope you don't die. And so kernel land is basically not something we're going to talk too intensely on here, but the Linux kernel has, I think, is on version 4.3, 4 point something at the moment. I could be entirely wrong on that. It is a pretty recently developed kernel, but it is a fantastic system for how lightweight it is. It's very small. I don't actually remember whether or not it's a monolithic style kernel or not, and that probably was meaningless to a lot of us, including myself. But it is basically, it was built by Linus Torvalds, which I'm hopefully not pronouncing his name too horribly.
I think that's correct.
And so he did, basically I think he wrote it mostly on his own, and then there was a team that kind of added on later. And a lot of his greatest inventions were the fact that it is a just very modular system. So I can take all of these pieces and plug them into each other and get things out of it. It's very clean as far as like that modularity goes. You don't need an individual command for everything. You can kind of just go. And you can build with these building blocks to make all sorts of beautiful tools and stuff like that. I'm a huge fan of kind of the Linux style of design. I think that it's a very good, like, clean coding style. And I think that learning any operating system based on the Linux kernel, so like Ubuntu or like Arch Linux or things like that, gives you a lot of understanding of just how your computer works at a little bit lower level. And I saw some paste as we were going. Someone asked how you could find the kernel version. uname-a also works. It'll release everything. My kernel is not Linux. As an FYI, it's the Darwin kernel because I'm on a Mac. But if I was on this, which is a Linux machine in concept, 4.9.93, just as an FYI. That lists all sorts of information about your machine.
And that was just kind of like booting up the machine, like kind of tells you in the beginning?
Yeah, so it basically just displays that information back out to you. Uname is kind of useful in general. It has all sorts of parameters.
You typed in Uname.
Sorry,
okay.
yeah, I typed in Uname.
I thought you booted up a Docker
Oh,
shell.
yeah. I did. This is a Docker container, but that is basically what's going on there.
Nikolai AJ123 says, what are you guys doing? We are currently answering questions, but we're giving a Linux tutorial, Linux commands, sort of Linux flow, and answering some other sort of philosophical questions.
Yep.
Like how one can become a skilled hacker. That's not a philosophical question. That's
that
more.
one is a lot of just experience, right? Like a lot of what we talk about in our cybersecurity group here is basically you want to just go and learn stuff by experience, by trying it. And so what we do is we host a bunch of labs for people and kind of throw them through it. I have an open challenge, I think, to anyone in my club. If they can avoid being hacked by me, I think, for like an entire session, I'll give them 20 bucks. White hat hacking. This is all legal. It's totally with their permission. And we're not hacking their personal computers. They all get a Docker machine, and we go from there. And I don't think I've ever paid that out. I'm looking forward to hopefully next year, though.
Wow.
I've heard there are some cool
sort of like humble brag. No,
yeah, like a weird flag.
That's a straight up brag. That's a straight up brag. I'm Kappa. What do you work with?
So That's a great question and a very large one. Generally speaking, I like to flip between some form of Ubuntu. I actually have one open, I think. Maybe not. I have a Ubuntu virtual machine that I use for all of my projects for my CS classes. And then I use my just built-in Mac OS and its kind of systems for the rest of things. But from time to time, I do switch over. I do also have a Windows laptop that I use for a lot of other stuff. It actually dual boots Ubuntu, so I can't really get away from Linux and Unix style machines, but I generally try to stick to Unix style stuff. I like Bash, I like Fish as far as shells go, and I'm a huge fan of Linux.
Jay Borgen says, "Oh my God, this is so cool. Why are you like a CS? Why are you like a CS guy, Nick?"
I don't necessarily agree, but I really appreciate the compliment.
Welcome. Also, I'm Kappa and Jay Borgen. I don't think we have seen you before, and Nikolai AJ as well. Thank you for joining us. Lince Podaguar, you just did many CTFs.
Yes. So CTF stands for Capture the Flag. It's something that a lot of cyber people do just for funsies, and you're very right. That is why I'm struggling to remember which one is which.
How do we find the kernel version? You went over that.
Yep.
Uname-R. RuneMech says it's monolithic, referring to the
I believe
Unix.
it's a mix. Oh, okay. And then Nikolai J
oh, right, okay.
says that it is actually a hybrid of both.
Monolithic and microkernel. Jinx Decoy, you can find this info in the Linux Essentials. Lots of good info for free before moving on to LPIC1.
Yes. That is very true. I actually don't know what LPIC1 is, so you're welcome to explain that in the chat. But yeah, I agree. Documentation is a great way to learn a lot of things, if you can read it.
APS Nice says, in my OS course I learned that whenever we run a command, the shell creates a fork process to execute commands. What is the need for executing commands in a new process using exec system call? Why can't it be executed in the same process? What is the need for forking?
Great question. We're probably not going to get too into it because it is a very cool and interesting thing to talk about, but also very complex, relatively complex. But your question basically being, why do we have to fork processes? Why is every new process thing a forked process? Why does every parent have to get a child and then like exec some sort of actual process in that child? And the reason being for that, roughly being that your computer has several processors, but a processor, give or take, can only execute one process at a time, or one thread at a time even. And so what that means is that if we want to run multiple like things all at once, like having the screen display, having like Windows open, or having like a Microsoft Word open, and then also checking your email, you want them to be able to run simultaneously, and they do not share almost any of the same code. And so basically what should happen there is you should be able to open up some process and then have it create a new child process that can do that. So I believe, oh, I forgot the name of this one. There is a just grandparent process. I believe your kernel is that grandparent process, and it forks a bunch of processes out from underneath itself, and then those become kind of what you end up actually using. And so there's all sorts of really cool things in theory on that. If you want, CS51 at Harvard has a great website for that. It's you'll know you're there because it has the Hello Kitty icon, I think. And that Hello Kitty picture actually has a bunch of executable stuff in it, which is kind of cool. And they do a really great explanation, much more eloquently than myself. But it is a very cool way to learn all sorts of things about that. Oh, yes, the name of my cybersecurity club is Harvard College Cyber Club, HC3, and we do all sorts of cool things. At the moment, we're kind of on a hiatus because I have been busy. But generally speaking, in the spring, we actually go and compete in a cybersecurity competition. We do the Northeastern Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. It's very fun. Cool. Andre pointed out that Ubuntu's version of PvCopy is Xclip, but in order to actually copy to the clipboard, you have to make sure that you point out selection clipboard. That's very good to know. I did not know that.
And that's just a repeat of the other one. Jinx Decoy, Chimad, change. Oh,
yeah,
I forget what it's short for. Change modification. Hungry.
That's awesome.
It's a good incentive for not get pwned, says Lince Podaguar.
I haven't heard pwned in a long time. That's great.
Jay Borgen, Nick, do you do CS50 as a full-time job, or do you have other stuff you work?
Yeah, so actually CS50 is just a very small part-time job for myself. I do it as kind of a CA here, and I like to teach people. I really like teaching. I'm a huge fan, but I'm actually a full-time student. I go here, and I spend most of my time doing
I heard it takes a lot of time.
It takes a little bit of time, yeah. Oh, LPIC1 is the first half of certification for Linux admin. That's awesome. Okay, so that is really cool to know, and certainly worth going through. I think there's a lot of these like great kind of certification courses and kind of ways of educating yourself on this. And at the very least, they just tell you all sorts. They give you the experience you need, basically, to see all of these things by experience, which is very cool. Right. The init process is your grandparent. Thank you. Is the granddaddy of all processes, roughly speaking. Very cool. If you don't fall asleep, you can take LPIC2. That's good to know. And then we got the grandparent process. Awesome.
Boy got ambition. This is Nikolai.
Appreciate it. Yeah, there's a lot to that. Cool. So we have covered what? I guess CD and LS. So we're also going to talk about PS, which was requested a little bit earlier. Stands for process, and it's going to list out to us all the processes running on our machine in concept. It will try and list out for you all the processes you have access to kind of talking about, and it will tell you any information you really want actually about these. This is another command where the flags that people pass to them tell you a lot about how they learned it. So my professor for the class that I'm in at the moment, I believe uses AUX WW. I don't know what the WW is for, but it seems kind of cool. I use AUX, which is all users and executing, I think. Don't quote me on that. It helps me. Oh, okay, maybe I don't use AUX. That's kind of cool. Good to know. I really don't use AUX then. Let me think about that for a second. I'm pretty sure I do. Okay. So that's actually a slight difference between Bash on an Ubuntu server versus Bash on Mac. I didn't realize that. I guess I've just never tried to run ps-aux on my Mac. So ps-a will tell you as many of the processes, I believe, as it can, with a capital A.
Just infinite processes right
Yes.
there.
And we could actually, maybe at the end, we'll run a fork bomb on one of our machines.
What is a fork bomb?
So basically, discussing what was kind of brought up a little bit earlier was having the like forking things, forking processes. A fork bomb is a process that basically what it does is it just forks itself and then runs forever. And so it tries to fork, it creates a copy of itself, forks that, and then also continues running on its own. And so eventually you just run out of memory.
It's kind of like recursion, kind of like
yeah, it's a recursive forking of processes, and it's really cool. It's kind of funny. It also became really popular in part because it just looks really cool when you type it out. Because there is a way to type it that's all in just like colon, bar, and like curly braces.
So
and
that's something
really
you
cool.
think you might try and do?
Yeah, I think we'll run that on one of my Docker computers.
Probably not on your not
on my actual computer. I want to be able to kill it. Sweet.
Nick, are you Elliot from Mr. Robot, says Shayna?
I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult, and hopefully that's a compliment. Either way, I'm glad I'm a person from a TV show.
They're asking earlier if you were a hacker or how to become how to become a hacker. So I'm guessing maybe there might be some.
Hopefully.
Can you please list the website? I can write it in here if you want to tell me the website with
it's
the
cs61.cs.harvard.edu. This one.
That?
Yep, that's the one. It's a great site. The professor is fantastic, and the class is also just very, very well taught. So I believe those lectures are open to everyone, and you're welcome to read through all the stuff we've done. It's definitely, I think, one of my favorite CS classes here. Sorry, 124 and 121, and CS50.
No, I totally
Awesome.
understand. Hey, you're here today with us, so that's all that matters, man.
That's true. Oh, wow, that's awesome. Didn't know you were still a student. Yes, still a full-time student. I am a junior. We're still working through that. Do you still work with CS50 over the summers, or do you do other stuff? I actually thought about working for CS50 over the summer, this last summer, but this upcoming summer, I'll be going and working at Google. So
shout outs to Nick for
one
that.
of my favorite
Congrats
shirts.
to Nick.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And so I'll actually be over kind of in California for the summer.
No dash J, what was that a reference to?
I'm not entirely sure, but no dash J. I'll take your word for it. That's probably correct.
And my late says Dana J. We haven't covered too much.
We actually haven't gotten through too
LS,
much.
CD, PS. Much more, I imagine that we can. Oh, it looks like they found it. CS620
Yes.
are Harvard.edu site 2018.
Exactly. And then Nicola JJ points out that you can combat a fork bomb by setting U limits. Ubuntu also has some kind of built-in stuff on like how many children you can fork at a time, and like there's a limit on how many you can do to actually help that. But that is very good to know. AUX. Very good to know. Thank you.
They found your club too.
Oh, nice. Yes, you did find our club. That website has not been updated in an embarrassingly long time. Yeah, we should really update that. I will update that probably over winter break when I actually have time not to do PSETs. That is very good to know. On a Mac, it's PS AUX, no dash. I did not know that.
TIL.
Huh, yeah, TIL.
TWL.
There you go. Sweet. So looking through this output, it can be very confusing. There's a lot of output here. It tries to give you the path of the executable that was run. That's at the very right. And maybe you only want to know if like a certain process is running. So what we might do is, let me see if I have any executables that I can just run and then ditch. Let's go and do face-off. So let's say that I'm running some sort of Python 3 manage.py run server. Hopefully that just runs on its own. Of course it doesn't. Is it worth showing? Yeah, it's probably worth showing. Oops. Okay, maybe not. You can run a process. I just can't think of anything reasonable to run right now. That as it's running in the background, you could then go and search for it. So let's say that I wanted to go find a process, and I knew its name. A process that I happen to know is probably running would be PS, actually. And so I can use this program called Grep. And this is a really good command for demonstrating just the power of kind of the Linux paradigm. Is basically I can run PS, which just lists out a bunch of processes. AUX customizes that command to give me actual output that I want. Then I can pipe that output into some other command that takes as input a bunch of like strings. And so what you can do is then grep will allow me to search through those things and only print out lines that contain parameters that I want, or you can actually flip that by using -v, and that will say don't throw any of the things that you want in here. But we're going to actually look for PS. And apparently there's a couple of lines that have PS in them, which makes sense. It's literally going to just kind of do a like PS check. It just takes the characters PS and sees if they're in that string at all. So this giant line seems to have PS somewhere. I'd believe it.
HTTPS, I see it.
There it is. Yeah. Wait, where? Oh, yes, there we are. Right here. Wow, nice job. So yeah, there's that. It'll also tell me the line that is running PS itself as well as grep, because those are both processes, and they will both show up in our PS AUX command. They'll also give you the PID, which is very useful.
Bavik says it's working on WSL, the PS aux.
Oh, beautiful. That's great.
Kareem says sleep.
Good point.
Shout out to Kareem in the chat, everybody. Kareem did the GitHub and CI/CD stream with us before.
So we can sleep 1,000. Control-Z stops a process but doesn't kill it. And then I can just background that process using BG. So it throws it into the background. It is actually still running. And now if I PS AUX, I can grep for sleep, which is honestly something I should probably do in my real life. And that will tell me that sleep 1000 is still running, which is very cool. Now, if I wanted to kill it, I could look at this process ID, 7717, and I can say kill. For a stronger version of kill 9, but I'm going to be gentle, I guess, 7717. And now when I rerun that, it's been terminated, which is very useful to know. If you're actually like on a Linux machine, this can be kind of entertaining. Where if someone has SSH'd into your Linux machine, you can do W to see who is on there. Watch is another useful command to combine with that. I don't have a particularly great example for this at the moment, but that's OK. And so W just tells you who's on the machine currently, and you can actually find the process that is their shell and kill it, and you can kick them off of your machine.
That's amazing.
The more you know.
That's really cool.
Cool.
Framer says, I'm amazed by both of your energy levels. I really appreciate both of you for doing this. Well, thanks for Nick for kindly taking us through this tutorial. This has been really cool. This is educational for me as well.
Awesome.
I enjoy doing this a lot.
Awesome. Another runnable command that would just go on forever. Yep. While true loops are also very useful.
Run nano or vim, less.
Literally, it's like when you're doing a live demo, you will immediately blank on anything you actually want to say or do.
This has happened to me so many times.
All the time.
So many times trying to find like stupid bugs that take me like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
That like a beginner would be like, dude. Like,
right, and like everyone in the chat is like, it's very obvious. And you're like, yeah, you're right. No, you're correct. It's very obvious. I'm just dumb.
What is the difference between pipe and the
and arrow?
Greater than sign?
Great question. So that actually brings us to our next kind of set of commands, which is great. So let's say I wanted to just take a snapshot of everything that's running right now and write it to some sort of file. So I can use this redirect, or the kind of greater than sign, and I can pipe output into some file. So this will save it in some file. We'll say current. OK. Another thing with live demos is anytime you try to type, you're screwed. You will just not be able to type correctly live.
Yep.
I misspell things constantly on here. So I have now piped that into current process.txt. People have suggested that I could use like nano to view that, tab completed there. And I can now see everything that's going on here. Very useful. And then to get out of nano, you can write output using Control-O. I use Control-X, and then if I made a change, Control-X, Y, enter, and that means that it's just going to Control-X, save everything, and then save it at the current name that it is in. There are all sorts of ways to customize that. But if I didn't want to do that, I could actually cat this into my console. And cat is concatenate is what it stands for, which is kind of counterintuitive because we don't seem to be concatenating it with anything. But we are actually concatenating it with the console's input. So you're just kind of shoving it into that, and that's what actually ends up happening.
Is it accurate to frame them as like pipe would be used in between processes, and then the The greater than sign is used for files?
Yeah, so the greater than sign or redirect is going to write to file, and this is a write redirect. However, you can also, so if I rewrite this, this will overwrite the file. It just starts at the beginning, rewrites it, that's it. But I can append to it too. So if I do 2 of these, now it's going to append to that output every time. And what I can do is if I cat current process and I do a word count by line, that'll tell me how many lines are in there. And doing this append, we're going to just increase in the number of lines as we go.
So what would happen if you did this with a fork bomb?
That would be very, very funny. If you basically monitored the number of processes, you would see it just shoot upwards, hopefully exponentially.
Or if each of those processes did that append to a file.
Oh, like append to a file. That, I believe what ends up happening is you would end up just writing an enormous file, which is very cool.
So there are no precautions against it necessarily?
Not necessarily. I think you just would run out of disk space eventually.
Wow, well, that's one way to screw somebody over, right?
It's a very entertaining, it's like the troll way of messing with people, is doing something like that.
Cream says, amazing as usual, Nick and Colton. Thanks so much, Cream.
Cream.
Appreciate it. Looking forward to having you on again. We're gonna get you back in here. Here's one from APS Night. What is the difference between
Control C, Control D?
Control Z, Control Z, Control D.
Very nice. So Control Z will pause a currently running process, so I can do while true, as given in the previous suggestions. Let's say do.
And so right now you're writing like bash scripting syntax.
This is actually a bash scripting style syntax. So the semicolons separate out statements so that you can run it all in a line or do it in a one-liner. The while true means just go forever, because while checks if some sort of condition is true, and true is always true by definition. So it will run forever. And then within that we have do and done. That's kind of the body of your while loop if you're used to programming in like C or C++ or something like that. And done is basically where it stops running that loop, and then do will execute everything after it. And so this is going to just echo hello forever, which is very cool. Now I can stop that with Control C. That'll prevent it from continuing to run. Control D doesn't actually do anything in this case because it's end of file. That's what it actually sends. And so you can do all sorts of cool things with Control D if it's looking for an end of file as its like condition for ending, but you don't want to kill the process. And there's actually some other nuance to Control D that I am not aware of and will not try to pretend to be aware of. Control Z is going to, well, when it gets there. Yep, oh, that was a mistake. There we go. Control Z will background a process. Sorry, not background a process. It will stop a process but not kill it. And then you can background it from there, you can foreground it from there. You can do all sorts of things with it from there. So what we're going to do is actually stop having it print output because that is very annoying. We'll just sleep 1. And this is just going to kind of infinitely pause. Control Z will pause that, will stop that process. And then I can actually bring it back into my foreground using FG, which means that it's a job that is running like currently I can interact with it and do all sorts of things. But I can also put it into there is no current job, but you can type BG to background it, which is what I did earlier. And if I wanted to just check and see if it was still running, I can see if it's actually going, and it's done. Sleep 1 actually doesn't do anything very much on its own. It just sleeps for a second, and then it's done. So it's a very quick program. And basically what ended up happening there was the process that we were in at that time was the sleep process. So that's what got stopped. The name of the process is generally, like if I were to wrap that in some sort of like, put it into a bash file and then run that as a script, then it would have actually stopped that file because that file was being executed as a process. But in this case, we actually just stopped it in the middle of sleep, and so that's the process that actually got foregrounded, and that's why it exited very, very quickly, which is very cool. So I'm actually going to check and see if that while is still running. Oh, no, OK.
Nikolai AJ123 says, of course it's hard, it's pressure, no worries. I work with this, but I enjoy the stream and might learn new stuff too.
That's
well,
awesome.
Thanks for tuning in, we appreciate it. It's part of the fun of doing everything live. You know, you never know what's going to happen. And also, thank you for, said you can't subscribe with Prime Sub. Thank you very much for your support. We are working on getting subscriptions working, but in the meantime, your follow is much appreciated as is.
Yeah.
Blue Booger says, greater than ampersand 2.
Right, so basically what Blue Booger's comment is, greater than ampersand 2, means pipe or redirect both your standard output, which is what will be redirected regardless, and the standard error. So there are actually 2 outputs that go to console in general. And on this sort of like bash and kind of paradigm shift in general, they will use standard output to just print out the actual output. That's what actually gets redirected, usually, when you just use this. If you add the ampersand 2, there's the error output will also get printed out. And so, or redirected to wherever you want it to go. So this is a really useful like kind of thing to add if you want to make sure you're capturing all output, not just the standard output. Very good point.
Looks like GX2G says, great show, guys. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
watch this all the time now. G2X2G says, hi. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Glad to have you with us. Let's see, make sure we didn't miss anything. Sergi VB01 says, tail-F.
Cool. So tail is, it actually has, there's a counterpart to that command, head. And basically what those allow you to do is, the concept is, head will just take the first 10 lines by default of input and print them back out. So if I were to do, what was it? I think head of current process.txt, that's just the first 10 lines. Tail of current process.txt is the opposite, goes from the bottom and reads out the last n lines, or you can actually customize that. I actually don't know the f parameters of tail. Oh, follow, like continue. So that'll just do it as you go. It'll only display out to you the last like 10 lines, but it'll kind of keep updating it as you go. So like I could run in another window. This is another version of my bash. I have like, I think it's really cute, Penguin. And it says random gibberish from the internet, which is kind of cool. I could actually write now, that hasn't been written yet. We can just take this and append it to current process.txt, sleep 2, and then that'll execute. Oh, I'm clumsy. I tried to get back there before so you could see it.
But you can see there.
But it has changed. Yeah. The output has changed.
So just anytime the file gets
was my
modified, it's listening for that modification.
Yeah, it just kind of sits there and waits, which is very cool.
That's really cool.
Oops, I just tried to clear a screen that is still running. There we go.
Even after hundreds of times, I always get the standard out and standard error pipes wrong. Usually,
Yes.
usually use the ampersand
redirect. Yes, that is a great point.
By greater than file name, we can empty the contents of the file. Control D
Correct.
quits.
Control D does not necessarily always quit, though it does frequently get used for that. It actually just sends end of file. So if you have something that is listening for end of file, then it will actually quit, which is pointed out by the next comment, which is if you use a while standard it or cin that greater than, then Control D will end it because that one is actually listening for end of file to be printed. And this is a very good command to know, which is basically just taking nothing and echoing that or redirecting that into current process. So now if we cat current process, there's nothing in it, which is very cool. It is a very clean way to empty a file.
This one right here.
You talked about sys calls when now going through processes. If you use my while loop above and then use strace, you can see the sys calls the process is performing. Yep, that is 100% correct. Sys calls are things that actually happen between userland and kernel land. So it's my way of invoking the kernel. It results in a protected control transfer, and then the kernel takes over and starts actually doing things. So some very common sys calls are like wait, or sorry, write, I tried to spell it in my head and spelled it wrong, are write and read. So am I reading or writing to disk? And there's all sorts of like cool things about like how buffers work in a modern computer. And they make writing and reading a lot easier, a little bit, well, easier in the sense of they are much faster. They aren't necessarily easier. They're a little bit harder to understand. But yeah, so syscalls are the way that we actually interact with the kernel. It's very protected, and there are they're pretty minimal. They generally do just very simple things, and they also have that concept of modularity.
Kind of like an API the kernel defines for you. To
yeah, actually a very good way of thinking about it is it's just kind of your interface for the kernel. And that's, yeah, that's a rough idea of it, but it is kind of, it's definitely correct. And that's what we're looking for here. strace is a program that lets you actually see the syscalls that are being performed. And the cool thing about strace output, I don't know if I have any programs that would have good output. I'll think about that. But a cool thing about strace is it also tells you the parameters that the like read and write calls were performed with. So you can actually see what was written actively to file, which is very cool. Cool, what is multiple files? Oh, if multiple files are sleeping, which one will go in the background? It's whatever the current job is. So you have an actual job or process that your shell keeps track of as like the current one. The shell itself kind of keeps track of that for you. So it's whatever one is the current one will get put into the background.
D3AA says, I hope you get affiliate Twitch. My internet here is bad. Well, we're working on it. We hope to have that adjustable stream quality here for you soon.
Yeah.
Tail F is dope for logs.
Yep.
Jade Lardenois, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this was John Charlie on the Facebook, says, I must have missed something, just joined Sweet Matrix animation.
Oh, right. This is one of my favorite things in a bash terminal. This is actually the C Matrix program running, and then it's being piped into lolcat, which makes everything beautiful and rainbow colored. And you can change like the speed and colors and things. And it's
I feel like you should bring that up at some point, how you actually did that, because it's a super cool thing. Oh, you touched on it last time.
Touched a little bit on it, but I can actually go into that here, especially in this Right.
Let's
Screen and
fork
tmux are
bomb.
great.
Let's fork bomb says GX2G.
Yes.
Oh, we got a special guest here in the
special
chat,
guest.
everybody.
Sounds like you're really doing an in-depth academic discussion here, huh?
Talking about some, white hat type stuff.
Yeah, we got some. We've deviated all over to like hacker type.
Oh, so you're simulating doing
yeah. That way we look cool, but
We actually just showed Hacker Typer today in our Muppet video.
I realized that while I was watching it, because remember I sent you the link for it recently. I was like, oh, check out this website. I thought it was a new website.
That's great.
It was from like 2010 or something.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but hello everyone. Nice to see you as well. Just wanted to pop in to say hello to Nick, our special guest.
I appreciate it.
Colton. So
The
good to see you both.
Jedi
Good to see
Master
you as well.
says John. Hey Professor, hi David, nice to see you. Hi David. We had a lot of people today. We were at 66 people earlier.
Dang.
Right now we're at
Yeah.
41. So we have a
that's
lot
awesome.
of.
And everyone okay, great.
they knew you were coming, so they're like, I gotta leave.
Watch them pour back in here. But yeah, that's. I think what were we about to talk about?
Linux commands?
Yeah, all actual Linux commands.
Well, nice to see everyone.
Yeah, thank you for coming
Thanks for
by.
popping by.
Yes, so we are going to go and talk about something. Redirection and kind of piping and things like that. So yes, we have this kind of appending, which is using the double greater than sign. We have just catting things out, or redirecting and rewriting files, which is just the greater than sign. And then we have pipe, which takes input and writes it to output. Cool. So I think we have now gone through PS, AUX, and options to that. Oh, right. Someone also pointed out that there are some really cool ways to watch what processes are going on in like a little bit more informative and maybe interactive ways. So Top is a program that is really useful for that. I don't remember if it comes by default on Mac OS. I have it because I brew installed it if it didn't come, and if it did, then I have it because of that. So you're welcome to try and figure that out. If you don't have it and you type Top and it says command not found, then you can use Homebrew, which is kind of like a package manager-ish, unofficial package manager for Mac OS. Super useful, and they do a lot of really cool work. So I use them to kind of install stuff, and it will list out the processes, and you can organize it by all sorts of stuff. You can there's all sorts of key shortcuts that I don't know in this. Yeah, here's some cool ones that let you change what is actually being displayed in Top. Top on Mac OS is not super great. I actually don't like it a whole lot, but it technically works pretty well. It also works really well on Linux systems, so it's very useful for that. There's an even cooler version of it called HTOP. And that puts things in color. It's the same information, but a little bit prettier. And I actually personally prefer this. It also gives you the instructions at the bottom, which I really need because I'm constantly in a state of losing my marbles.
It's like an old DOS.
Yeah, exactly.
User interface.
That's exactly what it is. And I think it was built by the same set. And so yeah, you can actually scroll through this, and you can mark processes that you really want to watch, and there's all sorts of cool things you can do with it. I'm a very big fan of HTOP. Top's okay.
Is that kind of like a CLI version of Activity Monitor or
yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think Activity Monitor actually is a GUI version of that.
Probably, yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense.
I came afterward.
That makes sense.
Very cool.
Let me see. Abdel, 24-hour greetings from Egypt. I have been using Linux for 4 years now. Thank you for
That's
joining
awesome.
us from
Yeah.
Egypt. Glad to have you, Abdel. RM-RF, then 2 characters, and everything is gone.
Yeah. Yes, RM, RF. RM is actually a useful command in general to know. RM actually just says remove. And so if you wanted to remove a directory, though, that gets a little bit trickier. Let's see if there's a directory I don't care about removing. So
you can demonstrate make dir and then delete that.
Right, actually good point. So let's make dir some demo. Make dir is, I don't know why I'd say dir. I sound kind of dumb when I say that, but it's make directory. And so I'm going to make directory. I should have switched the order of those words, but that's okay. My Linux demo directory, and now I have a directory. I can go into it. I think I have a bunch of things called demo, and there's nothing in here. If I do, oh right, that's not on OS. ls-alh, I just see the current directory, the one before. And so there's nothing in this directory, but even then, if I try to remove demo Linux, it's going to tell me it's a directory. So you can actually remove dir, which technically works, but it's kind of annoying. So rm-r, excuse me. And if you add I, that makes it interactive. Do you actually want to see what's going on in there? And no, I don't. And so that's kind of a useful thing to know. Otherwise, the F will force it to happen, won't ask you, won't care. Any error that occurs, it just powers through it. So when people suggest rm-rf slash or slash star dot star, things like that, they basically allow, that command would in concept ruin everything it could possibly touch. Now, if you run it as a regular user on a computer, hopefully permissions have been set up such that they can't actually touch anything in those kind of upper directories, but they would still get anything below because it's recursive, so it would just go all the way down. And so don't do that. Not a very good command.
Which is what J. Lardenois John suggested. Can you make rm-rf/ is for backing up files, right?
That is fantastically funny. rm-rf./ is for backing up files. Certainly is not for backing up files. Do not use it to back up files. We have to be very clear that we're joking, because there is possibly someone who will do that, and then we will feel very bad.
That will delete your hard drive, or at least delete as many
as
files as you have access to.
There are some things that it cannot remove. Can you make a file named recursive.txt with the code source recursive.txt and run source recursive.txt? In concept, yes, you can do that. I don't know what it would do, though. I'm not entirely sure what it would try and do. It hopefully would stop. rm-rf/ is blocked on today's Linux. If you run it as sudo, nothing can really actually be blocked from you. So technically, yes, but you could actually get it to go. We will get to customizing the prompt. That is our next section. Ncurses is a very cool little thing to use. It's something to go and look up if you'd like. Move home.
I think they were referring to the activity monitor thing you were having to. I think that was an Ncurses.
As the, oh, right, that's exactly what they're referring to. I'm losing my marbles. Moving your home directory, all of the items in that, into dev null. So dev is an interesting directory. It stands for devices, and it has all sorts of interesting things in it. So for example, we'll do head of this, because it's going to ruin a little bit of my output. Dev random spits out random gibberish, and my console just doesn't know what to do with it. That was actually a pretty mild version. If you spit out random bytes to a console, you can actually mess up your prompt and all sorts of things, because you can run sorts of like control commands by accident. So that's kind of cool. And I actually just found out about dev random. I didn't know about it before. Super useful. Dev null is another thing that is also kind of cool. And what we can do is, let's say cat dev random, and we're going to just redirect that output into dev null. And this will do nothing because it doesn't have any other output. But it's going to do that forever, because dev random is actually an infinitely long file in that I can cat it forever. And that's kind of nifty. I'm going to exit out of that one. But it's kind of a fun, useful thing. If you wanted to like take some output of some program and just throw it away, then you can actually do that redirection into dev null, and that does that right for you, which can be very useful in certain cases. So the devices directory is very useful. Apparently you can do wget. Wget is like webget. You just pull a website and it just downloads it. So you can do like https google.com, and it will bring it to me, which is kind of cool. I now have their index page. Not that I couldn't get it before.
This person
but they say malicious source. Yeah.
And then they have this -0-. I'm not sure.
Right. That's a set of parameters to wget that allows you, I believe, to dictate like what kind of objects you can get and how you wrap them up when you get them. And then it pipes it into shell, which will then execute it. From the name, malicious source sounds like it's not a very good thing. It sounds pretty dark to you. So probably don't want to do that. inode, cool.
Yeah,
and then what's the code to, oh, that's the code to install more RAM, right? Very funny. Yeah, no. That is not the code to install more RAM, just to be clear. That is not how that works. Cool. Might actually brick your disk if you're unlucky. Read an article about it. Yeah, it can do all sorts of nasty things. It also depends on like the permission setup and which user is running it. Generally, just not a good command to run.
No, yeah.
Usually. rm-rf to clean log files, totally reasonable. I use rm-rf constantly. I just don't use it on my home directory. Null is a black hole. Yeah, it's exactly a black hole, and it just kills off data. To the best of my knowledge, it does not get bigger and bigger. It stays at its own size. Difference between wget and curl. So wget will actually download that file. I now have index.html on my home directory, and that is now Google's. You can see the like, did you mean, and blah, blah, blah. But curl is going to just actually look at the URL. So let's say HTTPS. Google.com. I swear I'm not a living advertisement for Google. And that's actually going to just print out back to me what I typed in. Or sorry, not what I typed in, but actually the website that I went in to go and view. So that tells me that apparently they have a permanent redirect, that 301 code, and they redirect to their www.subdomain. And that's kind of cool. I didn't know that about Google.
I think Nikolai says, I thought you wanted to explain inode.
Oh, I see. I think I'm good. I actually don't know enough about it to give a very valid explanation. So I would say I probably cannot. Yes, dev TTY is the, what does that stand for? I'm sure someone will comment what that stands for. TTY is...
It's teletype, right?
Did you say teletype?
Teletype.
Oh, very possible.
I think it was.
That's very likely.
Oh, text telephone.
Text
I'm sorry.
telephone.
What am I thinking of? What's teletype? Oh, no, it is. TTY.
Oh.
Teleoperator, teletype, or TTY. Electromechanical typewriter. Oh, because the original typewriters were
What's
TTY.
that? Oh, good to know. That's very good to know. Did not know that.
There's a couple different ones, it looks like.
Yeah,
Well, if we
dev,
select the
actually, you can just ls what's in dev. There's all sorts of things in there. All of the devices, hardware devices that are connected to your machine are also in there, which is very cool.
Curl refuses to work on my PC. I've been trying to build some code from source and I can never find curl libraries despite having them in my environment variables.
That sounds, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that that could be going the way it is. Good luck. There's generally all sorts of actual reasons for that.
Yeah, I guess you can get in the weeds with that for sure.
Everything in Linux is a file. Yep, so that's a very good point, is that Linux represents everything as a file. The whole thing is a file. So that is a very good distinction to make. And then inode number is the representation of that file. Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's a valid explanation. That's fine. Did you cover all of Grep yet? We actually very briefly touched on Grep and what it can do. It allows you to just see through standard out unless you redirect both standard out and standard error, and then tell us like what things actually start with those letters. Grep is actually extremely powerful. It can do all sorts of stuff. -v excludes just those letters. And then you can do actual like regular expression matching using, I believe, Perl's regular expression patterning. A lot of shell stuff, you can use like Perl's version of things and it works pretty well. So that's kind of cool. Cool. Is it hard to get a job at Google? Yeah, I think it's pretty hard.
Didn't they say that themselves in that Barack Obama interview?
Yes.
They're like, oh, it's hard to get a job at Google. It's hard to be president or something like that.
Right. Yes, it was a lot of prep work. I spent a lot of time on it. And then you can view it by stat file.txt. Right, so referring to that inode, or the number given to each file, is you can actually do stat of some file, and it will tell you all sorts of information about it, as well as that inode number, which I believe, I don't remember which one of these two that is, but one of them is probably the file size, would be my guess, but that's okay. Actually, this, I don't know. There's all sorts of ways of reading that. And actually, when I get to this point where I'm like, oh, I don't know, you like have to deal with whatever, you can actually man page it. And so that will give you all sorts of information on it, on what it does and what it means, which is very cool. As far as Nikolai is pointing out that that is a weird output, you're correct. It's because I'm on macOS. They do all sorts of weird things. But yes. Man pages are a great way to actually read through and understand how things work. Sometimes you'll see, like, let's man read, because that's kind of an interesting one. So there's all sorts of versions of read, and a lot of times commands will have the same name but mean different things. And so this is the read in the built-in section of the manual, so that's section 1. And you can also go into the system section of the manual, which is section 2. Oops, I'm an idiot. There we go. And so now this is the actual Sis Calls part of the section, and it says what read does in the system calls context. And it tells you how to use it, it'll tell you who invented it or who wrote it, things like that. All sorts of cool stuff in it. So there's all sorts of really useful ways to use man. It's actually kind of funny. I know someone who was a friend of mine, or is still a friend of mine. She graduated last year, and she actually aliased woman to man.
Oh, nice.
Which I thought was kind of funny. So now you can type woman ls, and it'll bring up the same manual page. Man does not stand for the gendered term. It stands for manual, but I still think that's really funny. So I don't think I have that as a built-in alias, but it's OK. Alias is a command that allows you to alias certain commands into other ones. And if you type in alias, it will list out your current aliases. There we go. That's correct, plural. So very cool. After that, we are going to talk about how to customize your command prompt. Oi, I am losing my marbles. Cool. Could you tell how to set an environment variable? Sure. Actually, that's totally valuable. So echo, and there's all sorts of environment variables. In Bash, they're going to be prefaced with this $sign. So I think I can echo environment. Oh, just kidding. I thought. There we go. I was not entirely sure. Env as a command will list out all of the currently set environment variables. And so if I wanted to echo or see what one of them looked like, I might echo something like, let's see a useful one. Oh, user is kind of a fun one. I just don't want to edit it. So I can echo user, and that'll tell me what the current user environment variable is actually set to. But then we can export, and we can set some environment variables. So like example env is going to be equal to 42, the best number in the world. And that has now set that environment variable for me. So if I echo example env, it'll return to me 42, which is very useful. So export is the way that you can actually set them. You can also change like where the customization happens of your bash. So there's a script that actually runs at the very beginning, and it's in your, God, I always forget that I'm on a Mac. In bash profile on a Mac on an Ubuntu server, oops, I swore on that. It is under bash RC. And this allows you to edit all sorts of things about how the actual shell session goes and works. And so right here, that's actually in my bash script. I export a variable and set it. I don't believe I actually need to type export there, but I probably modified it when I didn't know as much, and there we go. And it tells you where to put the history file and stuff like that. Here's some custom aliases that I have where I use this to show files or hide hidden files on Finder. And then all the other ones. So I have VSC open because Mac does not have the code command, which is really annoying. On a Linux distro that has Visual Studio Code, you can just type code and it opens up Visual Studio Code. But oh well. Play is what I was using for I think I just thought it was kind of an easier thing for me to remember instead of love dot, which is what we were using in our class last semester.
Yeah. I like play.
Play is, I think, kind of cool. I use rest to alias this command. And this command is what you see here. This kind of beautiful output is from that command. So it's the CMatrix program. I did not write it. I wish I had. It's very cool. And so what that actually does is it prints kind of in the matrix, that kind of just stream of random numbers and letters. And then -C is the color, but I actually overrode that when I used lolcat, so I don't need that anymore. -S is, I believe, the speed. And then we pipe that into lolcat, and lolcat takes any input it gets and just makes it beautiful. Well, it makes it rainbow colored, which is really cool.
I think it's beautiful.
I think it's beautiful. Yeah. And there's a bunch of paths for the other things that I use. And then I titled this. And I'm also, this is where I actually customized my bash prompt. So exporting PS1, I don't exactly remember what it stands for, but it's kind of cool. And I basically went through and found a bunch of these escape codes and then what they actually mean and what they print out to the user. And so you can customize that. There's a whole language basically there where you can go and research all of these escape codes and what they each do and what they mean. Some ones that are really common are whack u, which is my user. Yeah, whack u. Whack h is the host name that you're currently on, so the host name of the computer if that's set. And then I just have a colon because I think it's clean, and I use the $ for kind of historical purposes. I have seen people who don't have this space here, and that actually weirdly bothers me a lot. When they don't set that space correctly, it bothers me insanely much.
I think David may or may not do that for his lecture.
Oh man,
I don't remember. I think I customized PS1 to be nothing but the $ for representation,
right.
and I just copied whatever he gave me, and I think it was literally just the $
with nothing
with
on
no
the
space.
side.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I feel
That-
I think
that's
I feel you.
painful,
I
I
feel you.
think.
I think I did notice that.
Yeah. All right. What do I see myself doing in 10 to 15 years? To be honest, I see myself running a company. Is the answer I gave in my interview, actually.
Respect.
Google should give me a pay raise. I'm just very glad to be working at Google. And if Google watches this, I'm very happy. You do not need to give me a pay raise. To work at Google, say that graphs are better than red-black trees and you're hired. I think if you brought up a red-black tree, they might be wondering why. Generally, their interview questions don't need them in order to be answered. Yeah, the OSX file system is something. Treating camel case files same as lowercase files. That is a very good point. They do treat them the same, kind of. I can actually CD into desktop lowercase. Totally validly. That's my desktop. It's very valid. But that's annoying because the actual file name is a capital D. Not sure why OSX made that decision, or the designers over at Apple. Alias is a lifesaver. Can't even function without it some days. Very true. Welcome to Shanna. Shanna
Well, I think she left. She said
okay.
at 1:56 a.m.
Oh,
at the heart,
I'm out.
she said,
I got you.
She said ciao. So goodbye,
Appreciate
Shanna. See you on the next stream.
Yep.
Alias is a lifesaver. Why is 42 the best number in the world?
That's an allusion to a book, very popular nerd book, I guess. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Great. It's the answer to the question. Oh man, I'm going to bungle that phrasing.
Meaning of the universe, right?
Meaning of the universe.
As they
Right,
posted
is
that
the
there in
meaning
the
of the
chat.
universe, according to Nwanda. You can also the variable in scope. Right, you can do using an actual variable as if it was a bash script. So in scripting stuff, you don't actually have to type export. You can actually just use a variable actually, there's a better, more useful version of this. For I in 110, do echo $I, and that will echo out the numbers from 1 to 10. And so what we did was we actually created a local variable. I is not set. Like if you do env and grep for I, oh, that was a stupid idea. Grep for I equals, it's not going to show up. And that's just because this is a local variable. It's the equivalent of a local variable. It only gets scoped to the usage here, and then it doesn't exist anywhere else. And we can prove that it's a variable just kind of by example or upon examination. In CS50 IDE, I added the source path to alias builder file at the end of my bash OC, and then that file has all my aliases. Yeah, that's a very nice, actually, demonstration of kind of understanding how things should be modular. There we go. Where you basically can put all of your aliases into a separate file and then just have that get exec at the end of your bash.
Someone
read my comment. God dang it.
Nice.
I leave funny comments for myself, generally speaking. Looked it up. 42 is a product. Oh, okay, that's cool. I did not know any of what GX2G is currently telling us about 42 as a number, but that is very good to know. That's kind of cool.
It sounds impressive.
Yeah, it sounds very impressive. Like if you're at a party, okay, don't say this at a party, but if you're at like a nerd party, then like that'd be pretty cool. You can sit out there and people would be very impressed. Do you have an online copy of your bash config?
I've seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, yeah,
right.
Get this guy out of here.
Okay. Do you have an online copy of your bash config? I do not. Although my bash config is definitely not terribly interesting. There are some really cool ones out there, though. If you just Google like cool bash prompts, it's very, very cool.
And also, thanks to Romac Natividad for joining us. That's a new person.
And welcome.
And Minraz as well.
Yes. Make is actually not necessarily an alias for your long clang commands, though it can look like it, and it effectively kind of does do that. Make is its own program that does all sorts of cool things for you, and it has a bunch of parameters to it that are really useful. But make, you could think of it as kind of like acting as similar to an alias, but it is actually its own program. Bash, the born again shell, very nice. Is Bash my favorite to code in? So I actually code generally using like Visual Studio Code, like a text editor. And so I actually use like, I'm a huge fan of writing code in like Visual Studio Code or Atom. I like Atom's simplicity and kind of its modularity. In case that has not been the message this whole time, I really love modular and very simple things. I think they're very clean cut.
Modular.
Love modular. Very cool. And my favorite language to write in is actually definitely Python, although I am a huge fan of C++. I also really love C. I love things that are statically typed and strictly typed because I think that makes coding a lot easier.
So we gotta get you on here for a low-level C programming one. That'd be cool. I'd like that.
That's awesome. What is Fish? Is it new? Another Z shell. It's the Friendly Interactive Shell. That's what it stands for. Very cool. I didn't actually know that. But Fish is also just a very cool shell. I can bring it up right here. It does all sorts of cool things for you. I'm a huge fan. There's all sorts of research on it also, if you would like to look that up.
Omar B. Ballin, thank you for joining us. That's a new one.
Love the gamer tag.
I use Atom too, he says.
Oh, sweet.
Or he or she. Hey, cool. Mr. Google intern, learn Golang.
I did mess around a little bit with Golang earlier this summer. I thought it was really eloquent. Pretty big fan. I just don't use it for that many other things, and I'm still kind of trying to become more masterful at Python. So I generally focus a little bit.
Are Go and Golang two separate languages?
No, they're the same. Golang is kind of the way Google people will generally talk about it, and then Go is the way everyone else refers to it.
APS Night, when is the next stream scheduled? On Monday. Join us for a Python tour. 100 cool things you can do in Python. We may or may not get to all 100, and that's going to be with Veronica Nutting, the current head CA. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah, she's great. Tune in for that one. She's awesome. Love Veronica. Dynamic autocomplete and stuff is available in Fish.
Fish has all sorts of like cool features implemented. I'm a huge fan. And then Python is my favorite too. I started with Learn Python the Hard Way book. Highly recommended. I thoroughly agree. There's also a really good Python reference online that I might point out later. Cool. Haven't taken CS50 yet. Plan to in the spring. Awesome. We're super excited to have you.
Stay Peaceful 89. Thank you for joining us.
Very cool.
Do you happen to know?
Oh, is Go related to Alphago? So Alphago is actually, I don't know if the terms are actually related. They were built, to my knowledge, they were built by completely separate teams. Alphago was basically related to Go the game, whereas Go is related to Golang the language, basically Google language. So to the best of my knowledge, no, they are not related.
Bavic's been patiently waiting for us to customize the prompt.
Actually go and customize the prompt.
Let's make that the next chapter.
Yeah,
here.
I thoroughly agree. So basically, on OS X, it's actually a little bit weird. So I'm going to switch over, to Linux, or to Ubuntu, and that should make it a little bit easier as far as what we're going on here. So in Linux, you actually have in your home directory, we're in root right now, which is the way Docker sets things up, but that's okay. And so basically what we have, LL, can't type for crap. There we go. So LL is the Ubuntu version of ls-alh. I don't know exactly all their flags, but it does roughly the same thing. Maybe no H, just AL. And so what I can then do is nano.bashrc. Right, nano's not found. So what we'll do is this. apt-get install -y nano. And there's a bunch of other commands that are probably really useful to know or have on here. That'll install and it'll take a second, so we'll go back when it gets there. I don't actually need this one open anymore. There we go. Cool, so what we actually can do as far as our customization on this goes is I can nano my bash profile. Oop, if I could spell, type complete.
I know the feeling too well.
God,
too well.
And wherever I put that PS1 variable, here it is. I should probably clear that line. Oops. And so we can customize all sorts of things here. So for the sake of just kind of not forgetting what this one was, I'm just going to comment it out.
Thanks, Jasong. Says good night, guys. Well done, Nick and Colton. As usual, keep up the good work.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you for coming.
Umain hum is, I think, a new one, possibly. Cool Linux command that most students don't know. We'll say it now and get to it after we finish the customizing the prompt. But
yes.
do you know one?
What is a great command that no one really knows about? I think there are a bunch of commands that I think are very underappreciated. I think one of the better ones, or some, well, no, that's not true. Nothing pops into my head as something that's like something you don't know. I think a lot of people know them, but don't actually necessarily use them, or at least don't use them in a way that I think is demonstrating how cool they really are. So I'll have to think about that. We will definitely try and cover as many of the commands that I think are cool in the next 20 minutes as possible, because I'm a huge fan of a bunch of stuff that people don't use. So this will be we'll call it the DJM prompt for now.
Oh, by the way, shout outs to Code Error, rating with a party of 9. Thank you very much. Appreciate it so much.
That's awesome.
Mickey K says, we're going to get a few new people in here.
Oh, that's sweet.
Sudo.
Sudo.
There we go. That's the command.
Yeah, talk about an overpowered command. There is that one. Cool. So I have now edited my bash profile, and I can open up a new tab. And I have now edited what my prompt actually looks like. So my prompt now is literally just the $sign. I added the space. I can't stand the non-space. I really can't do it.
I totally agree. I think it's great. Code Error says, hey, have a good stream, lads. Thank you very much, Code Error. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. Oh, sweet. Thank you. So yeah, we basically can edit the prompt through our bash profile. So I'll edit it to be a little bit cooler than that. And this is something that people do very frequently and forget that it does what they think it does. So basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to copy some of kind of the coloring that I do in the top section here. So these are escape codes that do coloration of the actual prompt. And so what I'm going to do is, oops, I always forget which language I'm writing in. I never remember which. When you're switching between Mac OS and a Linux kernel-based system, I frequently mix up my keyboard shortcuts, and then I start going to the end of a nano file and then command Ving and opening up all processes in
similar,
Ubuntu.
but still have their little differences.
Little off. So we can do this, and this is a common bug that people generally end up getting when they do this. So now my prompt is blue, which I think is cool. I'm a huge fan of blue. I have way too much blue, too many blue things. But the problem is all of the rest of my typing is now also blue. And so every output will also be blue.
Feature or a bug.
Feature or a bug, I don't know. If you like blue more than me, then this is actually a feature. If you don't, this is a bug. And for any colored output, it'll all get overridden. It's all blue now. Unless they explicitly alter the previous one and then open up a new colored prompt. But basically everything, what would be kind of fun here is to just cat dev random. And oh, that one actually overrides the blue because it's so weird. That's kind of funny. So it ended up not being all that blue. And I don't know if I can scroll back up to the top of that, but if I could, the top half should be blue.
It's like a lazily evaluated stream, essentially.
That's kind of cool.
Generated stream.
Generated. I believe it is actually a lazily generated stream. Very nice. Cool. So that prompt is now kind of screwed, but that's okay. Cool. We now have it on the Linux version as well. And I believe you can do the same thing, but we'll just go ahead and prove that. So we can nano bash rc. The default here is that everything is not in color. like this is kind of the only time that happens. But basically you could make it such that this is just always true, like color prompt equals yes. Why is that there in variable name? Or you can do what they suggest below, which is force color prompt. And I always love this comment. It's actually kind of funny if you read it. The focus in a terminal window should be on the output of commands, not on the prompt. That person is probably very practically minded and very correct. But I like the color of the prompt. I like it to be pretty. So, oh well.
Aesthetics are important.
So we can exec bash to re-execute things. And I don't know if you can really clearly see, but my prompt is now in color. And execing bash just kind of brings up a new bash. I think exiting, yeah, OK, brings you back out to whatever you were in previously. So I could also just run bash, I believe, and it does something roughly equivalent. For our purposes, it does the same. So our prompt is now in color. And now we can go and edit bash rc again. And what this basically does is the PS1 variable actually refers to your entire terminal. So if it's not set, then this just doesn't do anything. This whole file doesn't actually work. But we can kind of keep going and skimming through. PS1, I don't know if it actually gets modified in here. Oh, there it is. So yeah, what this actually does is it modifies the PS1 variable all over the place. And you don't necessarily need to actually like modify that by hand. You don't have to like understand all of this in order to modify it. You can just do the coloring of your prompt down at the bottom. Because basically, as long as you're not dealing with all of that code and you kind of override it, you would also equivalently achieve the same. So we can actually just do PS1 equals, here, let's make it a Python prompt.
Somebody said that. Who said that? J. Lardnois, John Charlie said that. I like that as my prompt. Feels neato.
Yeah, it is very neato. I actually have an Ubuntu server somewhere that uses like -- greater than, and I think that's kind of cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
So this is our prompt now, and we can go modify that variable again and get kind of a super neato version. You might actually do something like this, where you, and then you could do like that to point at your actual current thing. I think that's kind of nifty. There's all sorts of things you can do. I mean, if you're creative enough, like prompts can get very, very interesting. And so this will switch if I switch users, right? So if I did like a user add Nick, and then switch user into Nick, then my prompt variable or my prompt is actually set differently for this user. It's set to the default one. So oh well. But it would normally. I'm gonna set you up with that one. We're not gonna show that. That is very funny. So yeah, there are all sorts of cool prompts that you can do, and that's roughly all you actually need to do in order to customize your prompt. Which is very cool.
APS night, to answer your question, Monday stream is scheduled at 1, so join us for that at 1. Let me make sure that we get somewhat caught up here. There was a lot of comments there. There's no really cool commands the way you use them, but they don't know how to breeze. Use a combination of cattail. So I guess like ways to pipe stuff together. Yeah,
combinations are very cool.
Super awesome. I mean, literally sudo. Use sudo. If you have a command without sudo, then you can run the last command with sudo by typing sudo. Oh, exclamation point.
That is a very good point. Okay. I just did it and then did not get to like speaking about what it was. Exclamation point is previous command, and it'll just run it, which is kind of neat. You can. I was trying to think of like a creative way you can mess around with that. I can't think of one using nano, but there are some interesting things you can do with that. So you can do stuff like drop it into just kind of into its own shell. You can make it into a bash variable, the output of it. You can do all sorts of things. So there's some stuff that I think is actually really useful, like cat of the bash variable version of ls, but only grab. Oh, we should actually just do ls instead of cat because it might be a directory. ls. And grepping for, or not grepping for, let's actually just do head and 1. And so what that does is it creates a variable for bash to actually use from ls piped into head and 1, which means take only just the first line. So if I do ls, I get this. If I do ls and head into n1, then I just get this. And if I try an ls a non-directory, it's not going to actually ls anything out, but I would have actually ended up getting out that same output. So if I do 2017 this, it just outputs the file name back to me because it doesn't contain anything as far as directories go. So that's kind of a cool thing that you can do, is creating these like bash variables as you go. I think it's super useful if you're like trying to construct a path and you don't really want to type out the whole like current directory. I can do like pwd. And so this is kind of a neat ability. is like that/my stuff here. And that will then give me the full path. So if I'm writing some sort of script that relies on that actual full path, then this is really useful. And basically just being able to do that bash substitution is kind of nice. However, if I switch this to be single quotes, it doesn't actually do that substitution. So that's a really useful distinction to know, is that double quotes allow for bash substitution of variables, and anything starting with a $sign is going to be kind of treated like that. However, things that start with single quotes or that are in single quotes do not. They will not actually run anything from there.
Interesting.
Which is good to know. What do you think about Oxford teaching students Haskell first? That's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting idea to start with a basically purely functional programming language. I'm a huge fan of programming languages, but that too, but functional programming languages, because I think that they have a very eloquent way of expressing kind of the same thing as like certain OOPA languages. However, ironically, I then go and use Python. And like a lot of things are not purely one or the other. They tend to be like generally in one paradigm or generally in another one. Like Python can actually act very functionally, and like OCaml, which is generally a very functional language, can act in an object-oriented paradigm. So like they aren't exactly exclusive. I think Haskell is pretty strongly functional, but it is interesting to me because I actually hated functional programming when I first learned it. I thought it was needlessly like making us do things with scoping, and I thought that was really annoying. I've actually come around to liking it a lot, but it is interesting, I think, to teach it as a first language. I actually really like the way CS50 does it, where we teach kind of low-level language, which is a little bit obscure. It's a little hard. You have to keep like types in your head and stuff. But that's really useful to know. Is like things have a type, how things are represented, how data works. I think that's actually a really cool idea. So it's interesting.
Coder says that you look like Luke from Modern Family, which I pulled up a picture, which is that's what Luke looks like from Modern Family.
Okay. Yeah, not terrible.
Looking pretty ripped, you know.
Yeah, I want to get more swole like that. That's cool.
Eighth Wall, so thank you for joining us. I don't think I've seen you in here. Personally, I've just started learning Haskell, which we forgot to shout you out when we read the question the first time. Personally, I've just started learning Haskell, and it's so different to everything.
Yes, so it is quite, I mean, basically everything else in the way that humans tend to think is very object-oriented, right? Like there's a person, and this person has a name, and that's a specific instance of a person. That's very object-oriented thinking. Functional languages are very much not that. Everything's a function. Like I can do 1 plus, that's a function, and then I add something to that, and then I get that plus 1. It's a very interesting paradigm.
Omar says, in Mac, you can change the look of terminal with a single click.
That's a very good point. I love that that's how you went for it. You can go into, I don't even remember what I was looking for.
By the way.
You can edit all sorts of things on Mac using just like the GUI. And this is the actual like look for the terminal. And so you can do, I think, okay, that was it. I didn't really think that one through. I'm not gonna lie. You can do that, for example, which is kind of cool.
That is.
And yeah, that's a style.
That is beautiful.
Oh, what a
yes!
Oh,
please. Can we please continue like that?
Yeah, we're gonna actually leave this like this here.
Ooh, I've never seen a more beautiful shell in my life.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's gorgeous.
And neither has anyone else.
Yeah. And this is how you could set up your shell if you wanted everyone to talk to you every time they walk by your computer.
Nikolai says if you want to go the functional route, go for Lisp instead.
Lisp is a fun language. Actually, like Haskell, Lisp, what is it, F#? And then like Clojure is another cool language. And Clojure, I think, can be compiled or transpiled into JavaScript, which is kind of cool.
It runs on the JVM,
yeah, that's sweet. Nano for the win. I'm a huge fan of Nano as the kind of, I don't know. I learned it first and I was kind of like, oh, that's cool. VI is very fast though, so good to know.
Haskell says purely functional. Lisp is like the opposite. Well, Clojure, which is a Lisp, is primarily functional, but does have some mechanisms to allow you to program procedurally and mutate variables.
Window title, show the current directory. Yes, you can actually customize that. So the window title itself is actually more of a property, to my knowledge, of like you could customize it using like the actual GUI. I don't know off the top of my head like the variables you'd have to set in order to get that to happen from the command line though. Although I'm sure that that's also possible. Source file name do, I use it for creating aliases. So Bhavik Knight asked, what is source of some file name do? That's a really great question. I can source all sorts of files. This won't hurt me too badly. Like I can source the file that we did previously, and it doesn't necessarily do anything. It doesn't really change my prompt much. It doesn't unset stuff. But source basically says for this shell or whatever terminal you're currently looking at, then take that and run those commands as the source for whatever we want to do. So basically execute those commands. It's generally used for like setting up environment variables or like basically doing what bash profile does in Mac OS. So that's basically this whole file.
I love how we're still using that too.
Oh, we're still using this awful background. Did that change all of them? Oh no, just that one.
Completely
That's
discredited as a.
Yeah.
They see this in the thumbnail and it's not.
They're gonna be like, nope, this dude never touches a computer. That's so funny. Yeah, so that basically is what source is doing, is it's setting up environment variables. It might set up a bunch of like aliases and scripts and things, all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah.
Frederick, can you hack NASA?
Can I hack NASA?
That'd be hilarious, by the way.
No.
If you went on their website right now and were able
just,
to,
like,
that'd be
hacked
the
it.
most hilarious thing.
On live stream and using this. Yeah, it's like,
what a troll! What a troll!
What a troll move! Yeah, that's BDE right there. Just functional program statelessness. Yes.
I'm not sure what that was related to,
Not
but
totally
yeah,
either, but
the
that's
two are
okay.
tied together more or less.
It's really not something I'd use for anything real world. If you ever want to like know a great example of real world functional languages, OCaml, which I don't really like didn't really like as a language when I learned it, but I do like it now, is used in the real world by Jane Street, and they're an active trading company. They do all sorts of cool things, and so they actually are a great example of using basically exclusively functional programming. I know Facebook uses some functional programming in some portion of their code base, or at least I've been told that is true. And so that's kind of interesting.
Erlang.
Yes, right. So that's kind of interesting. There are definitely some real-world use cases for it. It tends to be a lot faster. Like OCaml is going to generally be faster than Python for equivalent programs. And what I mean by that is like in the real world, it's just faster because it has less overhead to translate it down into machine code. Although there are ways of getting around that in Python, and there's a whole debate there.
Fun fact, though, John Carmack did port Doom to, or Wolfenstein to Haskell.
Oh, right. I did see that.
And I think at the end of that, he ended up
That's
saying
awesome.
that he would not like to actually use it for game development, but that
Yeah.
it was a cool idea, and that
It's definitely a good
I think he liked the mental exercise of it.
Yeah.
It burned Linz Portuguara's eyes more than the light theme of an IDE.
That's hilarious.
It is pretty hard to look at the light theme.
Yeah,
of an IDE.
I'm not a huge fan of the light themes. Yeah, let's hack NASA for the new 101 class, Felony 50. Very good point. It is felony. And actually, we were talking with the FBI a little bit ago, and they were talking about how a lot of the government's websites could certainly be hacked. They just will respond. They'll come back to you. So, maybe don't. I will generally advocate not breaking the law.
How do they feel about white hat? Do you think if you say, hey, you have this exploit in your website?
I think their official message is don't hack us. That's a crime. Don't do it. Big bad. But I will say I've heard some kind of interesting stories of people doing that and telling them about it and kind of telling them like, hey, I could fix it too. And they're like, okay, cool, come work for us. I think that's not generally their hiring process.
That's such a split of like risk and reward.
Right.
I don't know if it's worth it.
I think if you're already just like an awesome, like an epic hacker, maybe it might be worth your while. But you could also just drop a resume through their job application portal.
I'm sure
I
they
would
have that.
say that's a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
And they will probably appreciate that method.
Well stated. How many languages do you guys know? You rattle off some of yours?
Oh man. So I would say that I'm like super familiar with like Python, C++, and C. But then technically, as far as like languages I've built projects in, it's definitely those three, as well as Java, JavaScript, if you count JavaScript as a language, and then
Burn. Stop.
Got them. And then I definitely built stuff in Lua, both for the class that Colton taught, as well as just Minecraft stuff. Huge fan of Minecraft stuff. I've also worked a little bit in F#. I've worked in Clojure before. One of my workplaces used Clojure for everything, so I learned that pretty well through them.
I've wanted to work for a company doing like purely Clojure dev for such a long time.
It's a very cool language. I think it's just awesome as far as like the developers who built it and the way that they built it. I think that's awesome. I worked a little bit with Golang, but I don't know it. I would say I don't know it. I've also worked in Ruby for a little bit, and then I basically just decided that Python was equivalent, and I only use Python now. And then I've also touched a little bit of, there's a language in there that I'm missing that I'm like pretty familiar with. I don't know. Colton said it very well earlier, where they all kind of blend together.
Yeah, that's what I do. Unless you're like talking about like object-oriented versus like functional. Like that's really the core divide. I mean, there's other paradigms, but
yeah, exactly.
that's kind of it.
Have some languages for yourself?
Yeah, my list is similar to yours. I think you have a couple more than I do. I haven't touched F#, but Clojure, Java, JavaScript, Python, C, C++. Yeah, most of all that.
Nice.
I looked at Haskell. I messed with Rust a little bit.
Oh yeah, Rust is a cool. I have not touched it at all, but I've seen kind of postings on it on like Reddit and stuff.
Yeah, Chad. Did you ever meet Chad?
No.
One of with the devs that we're working with who goes to University of Michigan.
Oh, sweet.
He's big fan of Rust. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, all languages. It's all
Yeah.
it's all one thing.
I think a lot of the focus for a lot of coders should be just the logic.
Python feels like the big one for
Yeah.
like most day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
Have you done CTF, Nick?
Yes, I've done a lot of CTFs. I don't think I've ever done particularly well at them. We tend to
Can
do
you
them.
explain what that is?
Right. So they're
For
capture the
us
flags. That's a great
non-hacker
question.
types in the room.
So they're called capture the flags, or CTF for short. And basically, they put you on some sort of like Linux machine like this. I actually have one in my Docker list. Docker. Actually, I don't have it on here. It's on the server that we use for CCDC. But we build these like Docker images of like Ubuntu containers and stuff like that. And a CTF means there's a lot of ways you can do them. The way that I like to do is like you're given an image of a computer and you load it into like some sort of virtual machine and you go through and you're looking for these flags. And a flag is usually either a number or like a string. It's usually a string that you can then submit for points. And generally different strings have like different difficulties of obtaining. There are like Pico CTF it's literally small CTF, and that's an online one every year. They're really cool. I think it's mostly geared at like high school students, and although they do get very hard, Pico CTF has some like very difficult parts to it. That one's more like a graphic one. You go to a website, they have kind of like this like version of a shell, and like you do start to get into like SSH and stuff like that. But you like solve puzzles and you're rewarded with strings.
Doing a live CTF would be super sick.
I think that'd be awesome.
I'd be super
I'd be
stoked to
down.
see you do one of those.
That'd be very fun.
What's like the min size? Because like obviously if you're looking for a string that's like AW, right? Like that could
Right.
be anywhere. Like
It'd be all
there
over.
has to be a minimum size.
Yeah, there's
for the
usually,
string.
so like Pico CTF just does like random generated strings, and I think they're around 28 to 32 characters long. They're pretty lengthy. And then I know like there's the bomb pset, which is kind of CTF style, where you basically solve phases of a bomb. It's a binary bomb, so it just goes off every time you like let it execute all the way through. And that's a really cool one. That basically the strings are like phrases. So I think mine was like, I am so strong I could pull out my own teeth, but I don't want to. Was a very weird phrase, but it's like not a phrase you could come up with on your own, right? Like you wouldn't think of that. And some other people like had phrases like, I'm a brownie and I could be eaten, like things like that. Like they're really weird phrases. And so there's some really interesting ones out there. But
doing something like that would be super cool. I think that'd be super
that'd be
cool.
awesome.
Government sites can be hacked, but all the government data isn't connected to the internet. Darknet/private nets, you could maybe access office memos to the website, but not much else.
Yeah, I'd imagine their website should be pretty segmented off from them. CIA, NSA, FBI all have some really talented people working for them.
2H Strike, thanks for joining us. Lua with Luajit has got to be one, if not the fastest scripting language known to man. Yeah, it's definitely fast. I'd have to reread the. I know I looked at benchmarks at one point. Luajit is it's faster than Python, JavaScript, but I don't remember what its other primary competitors were. But it is very fast. Yes.
Yeah.
Most coders are fan of the dark side, Darth Vader. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then they pointed out computer craft for Minecraft. That's how I got started with Lua, actually. I thought that was really cool.
Back in the old, were you doing this in like 2011, 2012?
So I didn't actually write any code until I came here. But I was kind of like messing around with Minecraft, and then when I came here and learned a little bit of coding, I was like, oh, this is cool. I now understand what computer craft is and know what to like do with it. And then it was like, beautiful, Lua. And that's kind of what ended up happening freshman year.
It's such a good language to have in there too. Such a simple language.
Yeah, it's so simple. It's very nice. Very easy to learn. I like it.
Fogelman project called Craft. The reason I was using curl was I was modifying a Minecraft port to see. I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with that repo actually. Yeah. They did a very good job.
That's
It runs like butter on a low end, not low end, but like a non-GPU
Medium,
MacBook.
yeah. That's sweet.
It's a super good repo. Definitely check that out. When you start in Cali, can I get 5-minute access to the US West master cluster? I need to borrow some GPUs for a Bitcoin mining operation.
I have a strong feeling that, one, I don't get access to that, and even myself, and two, I certainly would not be able to do that. I like having a job.
Rust is really awesome now. Also has procedural macros. Well, I am a Rust fanatic at this
That's
point.
good to know. That's sweet. Yeah.
The closure macros are really cool.
Yeah. Closure has some beautifully designed things. Just use Flans mod for Minecraft. It's already loaded with Bitcoin miners. Oh, right. I like any script language. Or Linz Potagora. you really nail these names. Like, I just realized you like say them no problem. I'm like struggling to read basic English, and I definitely am.
It's like my
everyone's
number
names.
one focus. I'm just dedicated to making sure.
That's awesome. I like any script language that integrates well with C or C++. I thoroughly agree, but I also am biased. I love C++.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then you can use Flansmod for Bitcoin miners. So cool. We would love to have special CTF stream from you. Yeah, we
We
can definitely make that happen.
Are you able to like easily just like generate one for yourself that you can do without having to like involve other people? Because I feel like it'd be like tough waiting for like an actual.
Yeah, wait for like timing it and everything. No, we could definitely have like a CTF stream. We could both do it.
I would be trash at it. I guarantee you. Not finding that string, 100%. But I would love to see your workflow, and I think that would make for a very interesting.
I very much agree with that.
It's because then you could like explain like sort of what you're trying to do, and like, actually put a lot of these
process
commands into like an actual physical.
That'd be a really good like supplement to this.
Yeah, it really would. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Minecraft is for soy boys. Not sure what a soy boy is.
You can Urban Dictionary's probably got it.
Because CTF is really nice for beginners.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And we use it in our club to kind of introduce people to CTFs so that they actually like go through it. Let's see. Have you experimented with GCP and Kubernetes before the Cali period at Google? DevOps engineer in Sweden, and I'm going to try and get certified as a professional cloud architect on GCP. I really have not experimented with them that much. I was recently kind of shown that TensorFlow got a port to JavaScript, and I've been super into that because up until that point, there wasn't a great way of doing it on the browser. And so I'm a huge fan of kind of that, and I'm going into learning that. I'm trying to learn a lot more of like Node.js and Angular. But it's also on my docket of like things to learn is like Kubernetes, Docker swarms, and actually like really truly utilizing Docker containers for what they're intended, and stuff along those lines. So I think a lot of my cloud stuff has not really been fully developed, but it will be eventually.
Do you use a lot of Angular Node at Google?
I don't know. I actually don't know super much about Google's code base. I think they generally kind of keep it hush, and then they tell you in retrospect, like, oh, here's what we did. Like Blaze or Bazel was done like that. But I'm very excited to learn a lot about it.
President Mars, a CTF stream would be great, and thanks for joining again. I remember you came last time. JavaScript with the Dan's game face.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, JavaScript is what a time. Oh, and that's very cool to know. So as kind of an advertisement for, I guess, the Kubernetes work, is they have a $300 free trial period and an always free micro instance. So definitely worth setting up. Very cool. Yeah. So I think we tried to cover kind of as much of the basics as we could. We got sidetracked often, but I think that that's one of the best parts of doing these sorts of streams.
I think we went in a lot of cool directions, though.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty cool. Like
definitely
the CTF, like that. Now that could have inspired a new stream,
I think
right?
you
Like
created
that's kind of why we kind of do it. Yeah, Nick is going to join us for quite a few streams in the future. We have 2 coming up, Docker, and what was the other one? Do you remember?
Docker, and I was about to just pull up my messages. You don't want to see those. Or maybe you do. I don't know. Docker and something else.
I mean, I could probably look it up on the calendar.
Yeah.
I think I put it in here. I got you for Docker on the 27th. Oh, C Basics.
Oh, C Basics. Okay, cool. So then we'll go through Docker and just like everything Docker, or as much as we can cover in that time, and then we'll go through kind of just low-level C, cool things you can do in C, all the like weird things you can do in C.
So not as much of a basics as more of like kind of like a dive.
Yeah, kind of diving into C.
And then. Yeah, we've got to figure out a CTF either if there is a slot open before the holidays where you're free or after the holidays.
Yeah.
We do have a very busy period coming up for CS50, so next week is Thanksgiving.
Oh, man.
So next Thursday and Friday. So next Friday, Fridays normally have a stream. We'll not have a stream next Friday, but we do have a stream Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Yep. And then the week after that will be the week of the 26th. We actually have the hackathon that week, it looks like.
There we go.
Thursday and
so
Friday.
It is right after Thanksgiving. Holy
it is.
Crap. Yeah.
Thursday, Friday of the week after that. And that week, Nick is going to do a Docker stream, and we have someone else doing a biostat stream, which we'll release more information about soon.
Sweet.
So that Monday is free. I might do a game stream that Monday. Then the week after that, it looks like the fair. See, week after week after week of busy stuff.
All right after one another. That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk about it and then we'll figure it out because I think that'd be super cool.
Yeah,
that'd be super cool.
That'd be fantastic. I actually also just thought of, because someone brought up the Bitcoin stuff, we could go through a small tutorial on like Bitcoin and how
that would
how to
be
mine
really cool. Like
I think
that's going to make for some awesome content. Yeah.
I mean, everyone's always like talking about Bitcoin. It'd be
Yeah,
nice if
let's,
like you guys actually knew
like
what
tangibly
that was. Yeah.
demonstrate what it means
What
to
it
do
is,
it. Yeah,
what are we
I mean, I'm
doing?
curious because I haven't
Yeah.
ever thought to look into it, so I don't know.
I got into it a little bit, maybe about 2 years ago, right after I kind of went through CS50, and then I was like, oh wow, like CS is so cool, and I just dove into a bunch of things, and Bitcoin was one of them, and I actually like did all sorts of cool things with that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
That'd be a really fun
Put it on
stream.
CTEL, we'll do a Bitcoin stream.
We're like getting these streams out there.
There's so
That's
many
awesome.
topics. There's so many topics. So like a CS Renaissance man.
Yeah.
That's what is
Oh, thank you.
Nick Wong. You guys are a power duo. You should do a rundown of Kali.
Oh, Kali would be awesome. I would love to do that.
So I don't know what that is at all. So if you could explain what that is.
So it's a Linux distribution that is explicitly designed for penetration testing. So for white hat hacking, it comes pre-installed with like all these crazy tools. It created a lot of script kiddies, basically, and there's a bunch of people running around who are like, oh, I know how to hack, and then they like go and just run a bunch of scripts. And like that's okay. I think that's a great way to get started. I think people kind of abuse it a little bit, but that's okay. But it's also a fairly lightweight distro. I know someone who keeps a version of it on a bootable USB and that they just carry around, and they can just boot any computer into it, which is very cool. We should definitely do that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd be super curious. I don't know if there's any way to tie that with the CTF stream, but the two are like at least somewhat related, but maybe they're both completely worth having separate streams for.
Yeah.
Great stream. Fix that subscribe button and the bits button. We will do. Thank you very much for being willing to show us some support. Can't talk. Thank you very much, Nikolai. Appreciate it. Can you do a basic tutorial of machine learning as well? So I guess maybe because I think Ashley was there for the other one.
Yeah. So we can also cover.
I guess maybe a smaller,
bit more like in smaller chunks, like a little bit more low level, just kind of like
or maybe describe like what we have from the like very ground up. Like if you were to talk about, I don't know anything about machine learning, but like linear regression is a thing, right?
Sure, and like we could go through a little bit more of the theory.
Yeah,
I think
that would be cool. I think people would get some value out of that. When's the Docker one? The Docker one is, let me pull up the calendar. It is on the 27th of November, 11/27. So that's the week after next.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that one. That'll be cool. That'll help us cover some of the gaps that we have now because we're talking about Docker as well.
We use Docker. There's all sorts of tools that we use that we forget that we haven't talked about.
I enjoyed the stream, but try to stay a bit more on topic in the beginning and save the free talk for later, says President Marth. Good point. We'll try to do so. We had a lot of really nice tangents. He did lead us in some good directions, though.
It definitely got us to some places.
We got to explore some things that we might not have come up or necessarily organically, the CTF stuff being part of that. But good. We did have a
focus
very lively chat today. More on blockchain tech, which is tied with the Bitcoin. Ashley, we'll be rich. Let's be rich. We'll give the cut to Nick.
I appreciate it.
Bitcoin
thank you.
Keep it on USB, and the second one for persistence, stick it in a library computer and go nuts.
There was an experiment done at, I want to say, Hack5. So they're a really cool group. If anybody from Hack5 is ever watching one of these, you guys are awesome. You've inspired a lot of my own personal projects. And so Hack5 did this kind of like maybe informal experiment where they took a bunch of USB sticks with like a bunch of scripts on them, and they just tossed them around like a campus, and they wanted to see who would actually like plug in these like USBs and then just see like let things run. And apparently it's like a frighteningly large number of people. It was like 60% or something like actually ran these scripts on their computers. So like as like a PSA, don't pick up random USBs and use them. Maybe run that through like a sandbox computer that you have, or like set it up like a virtual machine that is pretty safely sandboxed and then throw it through that. Like, don't run it on your actual computer. I think that's some computer safety that people don't necessarily know.
Oh, right, and then also cybersecurity.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll definitely, especially towards the spring, we'll cover
a lot of stuff. Because
part
of the CTF, it's all kind of interrelated.
They're all touching each other.
We have a lot of intersectional ideas at this point. Check out Python Anaconda. It takes about 10 years to load, but it works nicely.
Yeah.
And Jupiter says let's put it. The two of those are kind of more or less related.
PyCharm is also very nice.
Yep.
There's a lot of things built around Python. Python is just beautifully well
There's
developed.
just so much stuff, period, in the world, in the universe that is computer science and cybersecurity and hacking. Anyone in chat, this is an IT security. Go over to security now and start listening to the pod. IT-security. Best security pod out there, like 800 episodes. You'll be busy for a while.
That is a very good point. They cover all sorts of cool things. I think they're on Spotify too.
Interesting. This is a world that I have not dived into, so I would be curious. Like I'm just a novice, sort of like grasshopper.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And enjoying the stuff that you have to teach. Picking up a USB you find is like getting an STD. I guess you could sort of
you can make that analogy. Yeah.
I use VS Code for everything in Vim in dire situations, especially Python.
I love the way that's phrased. In dire situations, I use Vim. Like it just comes
basically
out.
Basically like SSHing into a server. That's what comes to my mind. I'm sure there's other ones.
That's a very good point.
Steve Gibson and Leo Bonaparte, Nikolai referring to the other one. If
Yep.
Colton is a novice, what are we, says for someone who's not more.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's not a novice. He's very experienced in a lot of things.
In the field of
just not in this field.
cybersecurity, I am a novice. I know some things about
Yeah,
some
there you
things, but in the world of CS, and I think this is universally true, just whatever field you want to go into and whatever you want to explore and deep dive into, you're always going to find more sort of streams
always
and
more.
just areas to go to which you just completely lost. But it's fun. Like exploring new stuff is
super
a great.
cool. That's why I love
lot of
the
fun.
field.
And it's cool that we can do this. And like, not only is it like it's not just like Nick showing me stuff. It's like we get to
I'm
show
learning stuff from you guys.
Stuff. We put this on YouTube. It's going into the world for everybody to learn from. So it's a great time.
It's a lot of fun. I really like that. That like CS is just such a field where you can learn forever. It's just perpetually growing.
It's perpetually
even in any
evolving,
one facet. Like if you were to just pick like, I don't know, it's like a small-ish one. Like if you just picked C, if you picked malloc, right? Like you just picked like a single function in C, and you could spend your entire career on that.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I think that's fantastic. It's super cool. It's what's inspiring about this. But like you could take I think like Google has its own malloc like team, and like there are people who still rewrite malloc and try to make it better, try to make it faster, try to do all sorts of cool things with it. And that's just one function in C, in C++, right? Like
It's an important function.
Super important, but only one.
Yeah.
There can be like a whole specialist around that thing. And so I think that that's really cool. I also just am very inspired all the time in CS. Like anytime I meet someone who also does CS, they always have something that I can learn from them and I can teach them something. And like I think regardless of how far you go in CS, you are always just learning, which is very cool. Like I know like even professors here will say things like, "Oh, I didn't know that" in lecture, right? Like we'll teach them something. Very rare. Very rare. But it's very cool. I think that's one of the strengths that CS has, is that it should be an all-inclusive, should be an all-supportive community. And if that's not true, then I'd be very sad.
Jill Arnold says, I wonder if I could build a Skyrim Fallout 4 modding team with you guys. If I were into modding, I would be down because I like Skyrim and Fallout.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would spend that. If I decide I want to spend the time to do a Fallout or Skyrim mod, I will definitely. I know the first person I'm going to come ask.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would have to get into that zone.
I think someone put Doom on Pip, on like the Pip-Boy.
Did they really?
For Fallout 4? Yeah.
That is like
kind of awesome.
That's really cool. I did not know about that one.
Yeah.
You need to pick a really small area to be a specialist, as Nikolai.
Yeah.
I feel like even
I
that probably you probably still keep learning forever.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure you're still just going.
Always.
Even as an
always.
expert, I think people are still learning.
Unrelated,
but Nwanda says that, did you know that the characters from The Matrix, like in my screensaver, were from a Japanese cookbook? I did not know that, and I am, like right after this, going to try and find a way to include those as the only characters on this screensaver now, just as an FYI. That is very cool. Awesome.
David Sir's Master Yoda for me, says Bavik Knight. Yes, yes indeed.
Yeah, David does a lot of really cool things. That's awesome. I would be pretty done.
I know how things are done, but not really complete a project beyond teaching it. Yeah, no, it's a universe. Just dive in, do what's interesting too, because you specialize in what you find fun, right?
Yeah.
I love games. You like games and a bunch of other stuff.
I do like games. I have a lot of
hands on a lot of pots at the moment. But I think I tend towards games. I think, but I like all the stuff's interesting.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. I would definitely advise, like, just people always, like, in CS and in like Silicon Valley, there's like this culture of like everyone needs to be spending all their free time on personal projects. Oops. And like that is, I guess, maybe true-ish. Like there's some portion of that that's true. And I personally spend a ton of my time on personal projects, but I think a lot of people try to focus on like what's the most prestigious personal project I could build or like things like that. I just do it out of pure interest, like if I could. You know, like is it even possible for me to do it? I just think that's cool. And so like sometimes you'll find that you build cool personal projects. I mean, one of my personal projects was like setting up my local DNS network in my like house and finding a way to like attack it. Like an automated way to attack it. I thought that was really cool, but I just did it for that. But it ended up being kind of a cool process.
And then I shut down Google.
And then I like went and hacked the NSA. You know, like and then it was fun. I did not NSA. I did not hack you.
This is a pet project, you know.
Just a pet project. But there are other ones that are way dumber where I just thought they were kind of cool and did them for fun, like building a way to cheat at Scrabble. Very algorithmically, super simple. There's very little that actually has to be done there. It's a very limited project. It has almost no scope. I just thought it was cool. Like I just wanted to do it and I wanted to like mess around. And so I think that pursuing projects that you're just interested in, you eventually stumble into something that is actually just like people will be amazed by. And along the way you learn a lot.
Things grow. Like a small
Yeah.
project can, evolutionarily.
Yeah.
That's a terrible word, but you can grow piece by piece. It can evolve.
Evolve
I should
into
say.
what it's going to. Yeah.
John says, "Hey Cole, ask me the big question: Unity or Unreal?" I think I talked about this in one of the streams. I like Unity. I like them both. I don't use Unreal a lot, but I think it's a great engine. It's very cutting edge. Its graphics and shader technology is amazing, and from what I understand, better than Unity. Although Unity is catching up and doing a great job. Unreal and Unity kind of differ in their paradigm in terms of how they get people actually making games. Unity does kind of require that you script, and Unreal has a visual scripting language and wraps C++ instead of C#. Unity is adopting bits and pieces of that, and I imagine Unreal is probably doing the same thing with how Unity does its stuff. They're both great engines. I would say if you're getting started on lower hardware, Unity is going to work a lot better. Unreal is very taxing. My computer cannot run the Unreal Engine to make projects, but Unity runs perfectly fine.
That's a good point.
Try them both out and see which one you prefer, honestly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So Lardenois asks, could I show everyone how to set up like a Raspberry Pi or some other mini computer, like a Snapdragon or something, as hardware host file between the machine and router? So basically as like a caching server, I think is what you're asking. And like, yeah, actually I would super love to do some like Raspberry Pi streams. I have like 1 million Raspberry Pis. I honestly would love to advertise for Raspberry Pi because like, I think they wrote an article where they're like, oh, we're only gonna sell 1,000 of these, like it'll flop. And it's like the most successful mini computer business ever, and it's super cool. I would really love to like go through just like a whole process on like what you can do with a Raspberry Pi. I've built a ton of things on them just for fun, like DNS servers, all the way to like an email server for myself, or like my own personal VPN actually runs on a Raspberry Pi, I think. I've built some kind of like load balancers and just kind of like practicing network practices and like ideas in my home. My parents hate my Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi is set up very weirdly in my room, but that's okay.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
I'm having a hard time figuring out how you get all this time to do all these things.
I just don't sleep very much.
As a Harvard student as well. I know Robert wanted to do a stream on Arduino, and so we would need to get a computer or not a camera set up to film up close here, so we can actually see what you're doing with the hardware. Although for
Raspberry Pi it'd probably be okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't need that, right?
Yeah, I can just port the screen onto one of these.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
they use HDMI now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, then that would work totally fine. So I guess we would need that. I guess if you did want to do hardware specific stuff, we could have that as well.
Man, there's so many. We should write this down.
Oh, I know. I'm going to go through all these ideas. We'll talk about it. We'll
after.
schedule it up. We're going to have that. We're going to get that taken care of for J-Term. One Panda says, "Hello, handsome," and assuming they're
Probably
referring
to
to you,
but like, we'll figure it out.
So thanks, One Bad Panda, to whomever you were addressing.
We appreciate it. We'll just mutually appreciate it.
Yeah, we mutually appreciate it. Yeah. Just one collective.
Yeah, just a collective handsome. I like that. That's good.
Nick can do that Rubik's Cube solver game in 3D Unity in no time, I guess, says Bavik Knight. They were talking about making a Rubik's Cube game.
Yeah.
Like where you actually have a
solve it.
Rubik's Cube. I guess not a solver. I think they specified that it wasn't actually a solver. They just meant a game where you could play, but a solver too. I guess you can make a solver for it too, right?
Yeah. I would imagine he could build the game a lot faster than I could.
I don't know
I could maybe write a script to solve it, though.
I don't know about that.
That's awesome.
Nick can have his own channel, I think. YouTube channel, Nick and Things. I'm sure that would actually
I really
do quite
like
well.
that name.
You do have a stream, but you don't.
I do.
You don't
but I
use
use it for like gaming and other things.
Which is another
that
question.
Be a good idea.
Do you guys have your own Twitch streams for games and projects?
Yes, I do actually. So I think my Twitch stream, it comes straight from my console.
Do you want me to?
Let me think of the name. I will remember it for next time, and then we will broadcast that on here.
I might do a games one in the future, a personal one, but I don't have one set up now.
Sweet.
I've thought about it though. It would be pretty cool to play some games on stream. So we'll maybe figure that out. Good portable wireless server to our Raspberry Pi. Do you guys have your own? If we need one and we need one robotics or MATLAB, if you guys do that camera kind of stuff for Arduino.
Every biology professor has us use MATLAB. I'm pretty good at MATLAB now. But it's just such a weirdly written piece of software. It's very powerful and does a lot of very cool things. Has a function for everything you could do in signals processing, stuff like that. It's just so strange. It's just a weird thing to work with. I'm not a huge fan personally, but I've gotten to be a lot better at it, and I've gotten to be a bigger fan of it. And now when we get P sets that are all in MATLAB, everyone's like, oh no, I don't know how to code, but I'm half CS, so it's oh sweet, that's an easy night for me.
It works, yeah.
So we could do a stream on that.
We'll figure it out. We have literally thousands
we have a bunch of ideas
at
now.
this point. We've been going for 2 hours 20. I think maybe we'll take any last questions and then probably adjourn for the day. It's Friday, so that's the end of the week for
Yes.
streaming. But
At least here.
Next, wait, the stream went away? Oh, that's unfortunate. Or the chat went away, I should say.
Oh no.
That's tragic. Let's bring that back
Yikes.
up. The chat messages will still pop up.
Yeah.
But yeah, Monday Veronica, Tuesday. What's on Tuesday? Crap.
Great
I
question.
lose track. A regular. David J. Malin is going to do a regular expressions. I should know this better. I've been bugging him to get on camera. A regular expressions tutorial with DJM David J. Malin on next Tuesday at. Is it at 1? What time is it at? That one's at 3. So that one's going to be at 3. And then on Wednesday we have a very secret special stream starring David as well, and that one is going to be at 1 p.m.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that one's gonna be fun. But we're purposefully not releasing any details on that one. And then the week after that, we have some other streams lined up. But that's next week's agenda. And Thursday and Friday are Thanksgiving, so we're not streaming at that point.
Yeah.
One last question. By reading this, you agreed to buy me a Tesla Roadster.
Oh, bummer. That's on you.
I read it.
You read it out loud?
I
Yeah.
read it.
That's on video, literally on camera.
I should have read it in advance. I trusted John not to do that to me. And that's what you get. That's why you can't trust people. Regex, yes.
Especially not on the internet.
If I get rich enough to buy you a Tesla Roadster just casually,
Yeah, why not?
I'll consider it. I'll consider it. Thank you, Nick and Colton, for the great streams, says Bella. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
thank
thank
everybody who's here and the
We really
people that
appreciate
watched earlier
Yeah.
For joining
And
us.
watching in the future.
Yeah,
really
it
appreciate that
it
too.
was awesome. Great energy, great vibe today. After 3 p.m. Unfortunately, it's going to be after 3 on which day was it? I think it was
Monday?
Tuesday. Tuesday's going to be at 3.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, says GX2G, President of Mars. Great if you give us some kind of further reading recommendations at the end of the stream. Do you have any, by chance? Do you know any?
Off the top of my head, I would say looking at like Pico CTF, they talk about all sorts of things. And then also just Googling. There was someone brought up a site that was really good, like Explain Shell, I think. Explainshell.com, yeah. So this is kind of a cool, useful way of like figuring things out as you go, is explainshell.com. It's very similar to like learning how to use the man pages, which I would also certainly recommend. But generally speaking, yeah, edX has a class on Linux, which is just pointed out in the comments. There's a bunch of resources online for like how to do certain things in Shell. Generally speaking, it's not done, like they're not usually done as projects in and of themselves. It's usually more you start to kind of use it as you do other things. That's like a general idea. That's not entirely true. There are certainly projects you can build exclusively in Shell, like using bash scripting and stuff like that. But I think generally just like pulling up a terminal and starting to kind of mess around with what you can and cannot do, great way to kind of get going on that. But yeah, further reading, there's all sorts of tutorials on the internet. And I think just like bash scripting, yeah, actually on its own is probably a fine Google search that tells you all sorts of stuff about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of YouTube. There's like multi-hour YouTube like hacking tutorials.
Yeah.
And I imagine some of that is good like Linux or command line. It's white hacking generally that I've seen.
Yeah.
But like good tutorial on how to like. I feel like if you can do that stuff, like you have to have a kind of a
yeah.
good knowledge of what your environment is
Yeah,
and what
that's
other
true.
people's environments are made out of because you have to like navigate them.
Navigating foreign environment.
Have a good weekend, guys, says Bavik. On Monday, we're having the first female guest. Ladies would appreciate that. Yes, we are. Veronica
That's
Netting.
awesome.
Shout out to Veronica. She's going to be giving us a Python stream.
Yep. That's awesome.
Really nice stream, says Hazy Akama. Thank you very much. And then Fatma says, can we use sandbox at CS50.io for Pico CTF practice?
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to.
I think the sandbox is a little bit more
probably a
closed
little
off
limited.
than the IDE, then, right?
Yeah. You might want to switch over to the IDE for that because it might not interact super well with Pico CTF. Also, Pico CTF has like its own stuff on their actual website where they force you to go through them for a while. And then later on, you actually start to use like your own local machine to like do things. And if you have anything that is Linux or like kind of Unix style, that'll generally be pretty compatible. So even your own local machine would work too.
Cool.
Actually, there's another resource. I'll give you the link for it. It's on VulnHub, the Mr. Robot VulnHub image.
VulnHub, that just sounds like a dangerous website to be visiting.
It's this one's really cool. So this is a CTF that you can do entirely on your own, and maybe we'll walk through it or something.
Oh, here, I'll pull up.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. Cool. So there's
It keeps
this.
switching off the chat box every time I do that. That's terrible.
very annoying. We'll have to figure that one out. So if you go to vulnhub.com, they have all sorts of cool things. There's also Nullbyte and Wonder How To, also great resources for stuff like this. Something to keep in mind is like people will post on the internet their understanding of things, and generally they're not necessarily up to date on like theoretical understanding, or they aren't always advocating best practices. So something that I would generally recommend for people is like make sure that you're really thinking like, is this the best practice? Is this logical? Can I, figure that out? Because it helps make you a better CS person in general. It makes you a better thinker too. But Mr. Robot is a CTF kind of. It's an image, so you would load it up through some sort of virtual machine, like VirtualBox would be a great example of that.
Not a container image, so they can't get it through Docker?
Right. I don't know if they have a containerized version. They might. That's very possible. It would make sense for them to do that. And so you might be able to look up like the Mr. Robot vulnerability container and maybe pull it from Docker. That'd be a very lightweight way to do it. But I happen to know this one off the top of my head, and it's a great resource for just kind of like, how can I go through and explore what exactly is going on? So yeah, that would be a great way to kind of motivate what you're actually doing so that it's not just like random playing around in the shell.
Makes sense.
But yeah.
President Morris says, great, thanks guys, stay peaceful. What time Monday? Gonna be at 1 p.m. on Monday, Eastern Standard Time. Just set up the Matrix screensaver after seeing yours, as
that's
you
awesome.
might know. And then Fatma says, I'm serious about YouTube. Yeah, so we're gonna get this on YouTube. It should be out today, actually. I try to get the videos up always within a couple hours after them being Twitch streamed.
Sweet.
I think that was it, though. That was almost 2.5 hours. Cool. So thank you for staying a little bit later.
Thank you.
We had a great energy today. This was an
Friday.
awesome stream. Yeah, and it's gonna be a good weekend.
Yeah.
This was an awesome stream. Shout outs to Nick. I should say this was CS50 on Twitch. My name is Colton Ogden,
and my name is Nick.
and we had a good stream today on Linux Command. So
Thank
next
you guys
time,
so much. And thank you, Colton.
Docker next time.
Docker next time.
I was a passerby. I was just enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the ride, having a fun time. I'm very excited for all the ones that all the ideas that we've come up with today. Thanks for all the input in the chat. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
I'll see all of you again very soon. See you Monday.